Yeah.
Sam, there you are. Good to see you.
Now we're live, going to air on the GCC Tonight Show. Welcome to Tribe.
We are live.
I don't want to do my check-in until anyone else has decided if they want to do a check-in.
Hello.
At the tribal conciliation round over.
Hey guys. Hey, sorry I was late. I was all set up. I had my puppy ready with me in my office, and then the puppy pooped. So I had to go clean its feet. So sorry I'm a little bit late. Okay, cool. And I have an apology to make. I was extremely busy this week and have not created the 2 documents that I said I would create by today. So I'm holding myself accountable for that by saying, I got to do that, but until then, today is not going to be that presentation of those 2 documents, unless, of course, you'd like to co-create them in real time. But other than that, we could talk about any of the things that we talked about last week, or we could talk about implications of, or we could actually jump into direct co-visioning. And then again, with a bit of the focus that I was thinking about us having and shifting to this week, I was thinking we should probably consider what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to suggest is that we keep our check-ins to a minimum. Check in however you want to, as briefly as you can, and try and see if we can actually quickly move towards focus. That would be my suggestion. So that's my opening statement for now. Thank you very much again. Apologies for being late and apologies for not having, and I'll tell you why. What's been going on when I check in, okay? So, nice to be here. I know you guys were discussing check-ins when I came in here, so why don't we see if you want to do that, again, hopefully briefly, but as necessary. Over.
I'll do a little check-in. I'll see how brief I can be, but at least I'll try to bring the check-in right into focus. So maybe it's not even a check-in, but I didn't attend last week because I was at a dinner, but I did get to see most of the video. So, and I got this idea of creating a co-visioning document. And I love this idea, as you all know, and definitely feel motivated to continue to contribute to this, since co-visioning seems to be, to me, really at the center of what all of this is about, and it's also a container into which all other things can be put, because if anything is of interest to us, then we could put it into a vision of a world we want to be in. So the creation of a co-visioning document seems like a very good project, which because it can inspire further action. And maybe that's really also sort of the essence of writing a co-visioning document, not just to have just a document in itself, but the process of actually creating such a thing will be something that can inspire each of us to do something. It inspires a kind of action, and it inspires also, I guess, a clarification of what our purposes are, what each of our purposes are. So that's one side of it. Sam also mentioned critical thinking and pursuit of truth, and he's mentioned this before, and that tells me that he also considers a part of co-visioning to be what I might call sense making. Now this interests me a great deal because I feel that there's a very fascinating link between what actually is true in the sense of real and what is possible. it's a little bit like if we understand more about what's true, we also understand more about what's possible. So this is why sense making is so powerful. And I've had a few examples of that in the Open Thursday sessions, where we've just naturally gone into sense making mode, and towards the end, very naturally, a vision tends to present itself about something that's possible. And so I love that thing, if those can be put together. Sam also mentioned certain values, like leaning in with curiosity, being generous, and being also critical minded, exploring, and also having passion, being passionate, because after all, we're all talking about big, important things. And I really love those ideas, or it's not ideas, it's really like principles. If we can lean in, really listen with curiosity, really try to understand, then this is what will open up a new process for co-visioning. So, okay, so with all that in mind, I'm gonna round off, but I do feel that I have tried to bring this towards focus, and I kind of will think of it as that we've already started co-visioning, because I think most of us seem to be pretty ready to sort of get a little away from the meta reflective mode and more into doing something mode. So today I thought I would write in the chat down whenever somebody says something relating to co-visioning, and obviously what will have to be in the co-visioning documents. Clearly a vision for the whole world, path to get there, parts each person will play. Those seem like natural, typical things that one would expect to be in a co-visioning document. So yeah, I love this project. I think it's really good, and I think we should do it and really try to make an excellent co-visioning document. Like, let's make one that really kicks ass. I mean, that really rocks. Something that's audacious, that really is interesting. Because then we really have something that is largely lacking, I think, in society today. We're really lacking a big vision for the future, a vision to inspire us. So yeah, I'm ready to go into it, and as mentioned, I'll just be writing down in the chat, and that will be perhaps a part of the material that we can put into a document later, about visions that we share together here. So yeah, with that, I yield the floor.
Glenn, thank you. And before others check in, I just want to say one small thing I would like to add to that is this notion of truth, because we did pound it pretty hard the last couple of sessions, not just in barn raising, but elsewhere. And I would like to have this word experience appear more often, because I think what a lot of people are speaking about is personal experience, subjective reality, subjective truth. And that seems to bring forth this validity to, I have my own truth, you don't know my truth, there is no absolute truth, blah, blah, blah. Whereas I think if we try and use the word experience more, that might actually get closer to I understand the phenomenon to be. Now, I still understand that even with that introduction, other people may still use truth in that way, but I'm trying to tease apart this distinction between subjective experience and truth with a capital T. And truth with a capital T still has a lot of ramifications to it. Some people will say that it's, exists. Some people say it doesn't. We can still have that discussion. But at least if we introduce experience to it, there's a there's a way to tease apart the distinction. That's what I'm trying to suggest over. But it sounds like you listened to that session very well. So I appreciate that recap there, Glenn. Anyway, sorry, this was a little bit long rejoinder to that. I haven't checked in yet, but who else would like to check in? Optional. Okay, Alex?
Yeah, I'll go. I'm sorting out the ideas I was thinking about with the brainstorming and the focusing, and a couple of ideas came to mind that resonated with what Glenn's saying about a co-visioning document, and that's a great way to get this process of writing in the chat column is part of the process too, because these shows are recorded. So that documentation is added to the collection of data. And eventually you get the algorithms discovering this collection of advanced thought, what I'd call with the people we were waiting for talk. Are we the people we were waiting for? Can we do anything that will change the old paradigm into something that promotes sustainability and cohesion and co-creation, a way of compensating people for their vision and effort, willingness to acknowledge the truth, as Sam would say. That's another deep dive. Subjective, objective. I think relativistically, we all know that hot water, if you put your hand under the hot tap, it's going to burn your hand. You don't touch that thing when it's red hot. Fact, the truth, and if you're an ambulance driver, you know a lot about truth. If you're a personnel if you're in the military or something, and you see death in your line of duty, then you know a lot about truth. Vietnam veterans will give you stories. Anyway, I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Optional.
Good evening, everyone. Good
Hey,
morning
Jaswinder.
to wherever you happen to be. There is a truth I've been espousing ever since I came to the GCC, which happens to be that we learn by copying each other. This is most apparent in children. And then we say to them, don't copy. We didn't know, we still don't know that that is the way we learn. Even very complex ideas and creations, they're copied. And as we get into our teens, this is purely my experience, I haven't heard it mentioned anywhere else, we copy ideas from other people, we copy tracks from other people. And just to appear that we're not copying, we memorize it and wait 2-3 weeks. And then we use that copied data, same as somebody else did. There is an article I put up either yesterday or the day before on the GCC, which actually is a bit of research carried out by somebody comparing the learnings of a 4-year-old or a 2-year-old, 3-year-old with a similarly aged chimp. And that there is a slight difference in our learning abilities between those two species. And in my estimation, the way that we have evolved to learn to do things which may seem unnecessary are the very builders of civilization. To copy blindly, to become a sheep, to be told to do something without question, and it's done. Hello, Stacy. This is what leads to things like ethics and religion. I'm not saying that they're not true things, but those who want to learn, like going to school, have faith, believe, and it might just come true. That's my check-in. I'm complete.
I've been listening the whole time. I apologize. I sent you. I just woke up. My whole sleep cycle is off. So I have been listening. I just had to feed the dog, make coffee, put clothes on. Um,
I still have to clean up my dog poop here also, so I'm going to take a couple of minutes at some point and do that. But let me do a quick check-in, and then Stacy, you've got an option to do so. Actually, before I do that, Jaswinder, are you complete with your check-in? Okay, I'll say so. Okay, so this week, Stacy, I don't know if you actually heard or got in early enough, but I was extremely busy on mostly two fronts, actually three fronts. One was I finally got the last of the adoptable puppies with their new family, and that took a lot of activity. And so that was definitely a high priority for me because the longer I kept the puppies, the more that was taking time away from things that I could be doing like this and co-visioning and work, et cetera, et cetera. But the last of the puppies found a great family on Thursday. It's with three kids, 15, 13, and 3, and soon to be 5 kids because that mother is marrying someone with 2 sons, also 15 and 13. So that's going to be a fun household. And they're very happy with Sugar. Sugar's been completely great. And she mentioned this morning that I guess throughout the entire first 24 hours or day and a half, she hasn't even heard Sugar bark yet. That's how calm Sugar is being and comfortable. So that was front number one. Front number two is I've been battling some technical issues at work. It's really been good, but it's been kind of blocked at every turn, kind of a thing, where I'm doing some experiments or prototyping in a very, very, very secure environment because I'm dealing with customer data. And that needs to be protected, and I cannot take the data elsewhere, et cetera, et cetera. I have to work around all these security constraints. So getting code written and tools put together so that I can work with that data in a way that the company doesn't normally work with that data seems to require IT intervention almost at every step. And that has to be tightly coordinated. So my progress there has been slower than I anticipated, which is frustrating to the CEO and frustrating to me, but hopefully I am yielding some interesting results. So hopefully that continue. And the third front is some of you know that I've had an on again, off again kind of a tumultuous relationship with my girlfriend. And we're still going through some of that. And so things are still kind of up and down, but there was a lot of activity there on that front this week. So that's my excuse slash reason slash explanation for why I don't actually have the skeletal co-vision document put together, and also a guideline to a shift in requested or recommended behavior here in GCC. Now, I want to stress that everything I'm trying to put together is hopefully trying to be of service so that we can actually feel that we're spending this time here in such a way that we don't feel like we are turning our wheels all the time and having the same conversation all the time, and actually coming up with things which may potentially be useful both to ourselves and possibly to others. By no means is it me trying to say, okay, so this is the right way. I don't. I just want to bring things to the table, have you guys consider it. Hopefully we can then have some agreements on what may work and what may seem important and where we want to spend some time. It's with that framework that I really want to put some of these ideas together. So as we've been speaking, I've started this document. I'm about to send a link to it into the chat channel. And it's basically the start of a skeletal co-visioning document. I still have no idea what structure it's going to take. I thought I had at the beginning of the week, and had I elaborated it, it would be much further than it is. But right now, it's a name with a few ideas, and I'm going to then, as soon as I can find it, post a link to another blog that I had, I don't know, a few years ago, called How I Write. And I'm going to try and attach that link so that we can take some ideas there from how we might want to write together. I'm very, very encouraged that 5 of you, 4 of you plus me, are here knowing that we've been trying to shift barn raising to a slightly more focused kind of conversation and a slightly more somewhat structured and somewhat more co-creative structure. So I'm really, really encouraged by that. That's my check-in. So, Stacy, it's your option now.
Yeah. I'll pass, but thank you.
Okay, cool. All right. So I'm going to send this link. I'm going to share this link now. I'm going to put it into the, I'm going to make it completely open so that all of you can edit it. And I'm going to put it in here now. And I'm going to respond quickly to a point that was brought up by Jaswinder and then followed up by Alex, and that is this whole copying business. Yeah, okay, so first of all, mostly I do agree. In fact, I don't see any area where I do disagree. I think this is elemental to existence and watching, those others around us who behave, and then we watch that behavior and we either do it or don't do it based on what we think it's likely to lead to. So that to me doesn't seem to be very controversial at all. In fact, I'd be curious whether or not anybody disagrees with that. The interesting thing is the juxtaposition between, all right, go ahead, Jaswinder, because I was about to make another point. Go ahead.
The controversy arises that the education system does insist that do not copy each other. And that leads to a time lag in learning. We get to the higher stages of education, where people are writing theses. Now, I do realize that to a certain extent that it has to be, by and large, our own work. But let's face it, we do all the reading from other books. And then we are told to write that particular information in your own words. Well, I didn't bring a bag of words with me when I was born. They were already here as well. So I'm going to have to use words I already acquired to write the same thing. It becomes semantics, really, doesn't it? And therein lies the crux. There are some words in a language, in every language, that must not be changed. Once you toggle the meaning, you've lost total sense of that word. It becomes blaspheming from the olden days. And one of those words is enlightenment. Enlightenment of the soul, illumination of the soul. Those expressions are sacrosanct and they've lost their meaning. We don't know what they mean, and because we no longer know what they mean, we don't know or we cannot practice the practices to get to that kind of level of awareness. And that is a great shame that we go through such a lot of trouble and expense to consider themselves as enlightened when they're not. They're just given a certificate. It's just not even the starting point, really. I'm complete. That is the controversy I'm trying to point out, that we could shorten what we want to learn, where we want to learn, through the whole process, starting with the 2-year-olds. In this house, the lady of this house, she's been here with me since 2011. So it's getting on for 8-9 years. And that was one of the things she used to say to the children when they were toddler age: don't copy. That's how we learn. So people who come in this house and they use that kind of vocabulary, say, how do you learn? Why are you stopping them from learning? That's what you're doing. And the quicker they get that on board, they can move to the next item. I'm complete.
I have a follow-up question here, because before I came here, I was thinking about asking you, Jaswinder, the question: what would progress be? Do you think for this group and for specifically for these meetings? And when you answer this now, I got a feeling that you're pointing towards how we can have real learning, but it's learning not just theoretical learning, as I hear it, but more learning of a way of being. And that reminds me of, yes.
One item at a time, please. Have you had a look at that video I put up in that post on the GCC a couple of days ago?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
So till you read the article and you have a look at that video, you have very little idea of what I speak. There is an evolutionary leap between a chimp. We're about at least 3 to 5 million years apart, maybe 7 million apart, I don't know. These are arbitrary dates at any rate. That leap in the ability and the way we learn, that is the important bit. Why we do the things the way we do them today, why we appear to be blind followers like sheep, which we're not. That is the crux of the matter. And the people who have done that research, that study, they do say something about it. And it's something I've suspected for a long time, although the research has been a while in coming. So when you have a look at that, then we have something that we can talk about rather than just going round and round. That's what I'm getting at, which is what we are doing in all the 4 aspects, programs, sessions that we have for the GCC. I'm unabashed in saying it now appears to me that the GCC moderators and the other admins, some of whom I've talked with and done some practical work with, which I didn't think was possible via Zoom, but it's very good, this Zoom program software. And I can actually see things which I can see in ordinary daylight and artificial light, which I think would be lost. I thought it would be lost in transmission, but it's not. I'm suitably impressed, probably more than suitably impressed, that unless we are aware of those practices and unless we actually do them, we haven't got a clue what we're talking about, and we will carry on talking about them as though we know, or we've read some article, or we've seen this, or we've experienced that, and that's sufficient.
So the goal is to be aware of the practices that work.
I'm going to put up a post later how to start becoming self-aware. So I'm accusing ourselves, probably me included as well, is that how to be succinctly aware, how to become self-aware on the inside and on the outside, and that the number of senses we have is not just 5 and not just limited to the number 22 either, probably a whole lot more, but we're identifying the senses that we use and the amount of data that we process per second is enormous. And how much of that is actually stored and recalled almost immediately or available for recall almost immediately is mind-bogglingly good. And we're not aware that this is what's happening. This is why physical activity becomes so important, the amount of data going in. Children are tremendous that they want to move around, they want to develop their bodies, and we don't want to. Sit down, behave yourself. Don't keep kicking that poof or that storage box that you're sitting on with the poof on top. Don't keep kicking it and banging it. And it's enjoying what it's doing. It's learning. Hello, Colin. So there are a lot of our adult actions which are worse than juvenile actions. I'm complete.
That's
I'm
for
much
sure.
obliged.
So, Glenn, did you have something, or may I respond?
Well, all I'll say is that what I heard is sort of the gist there of what Jaswinder would call progress seems to be then that progress would be something that makes us more self-aware and gives us a better understanding of ourselves. Basically, that's sort of the gist of what I heard there.
So I'm going to slightly disagree, Jaswinder, because I do think that the article has merit, but I think the article is actually suggesting something different. It is not surprising to me that copying is how each of us and probably all other species learn life's surviving skills, thriving skills. I think that that's not a surprise whatsoever. If you believe in evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology, then that would make complete sense. But it goes to say that's, core to humanity, and I think it is core to most of humanity. What I think it's missing is that appreciation that says, what other species, and I think this is what makes us human, has the ability to go beyond the copying and actually create something new in such a way that progress is, in biological and cosmological terms, so quick. I think that's what defines us as humans. So it is true that I believe most beings are unconscious. They learn by copying, they learn by watching and doing, and that's as far as they get. If they live to the next day, that's good enough. But we as a species have those individuals and, a very rare, we think it's rare, but I think it actually happens in everybody. That component that says, how can I do things better? I just saw my brother, throw a stick at the window, or the window broke and he got beat. How can I do better than that? How can I throw the stick at the window and not get caught? Those are kind of things that question people's behavior, right? So it's that questioning that says, if I do this, I can get a slightly different result. And I think that can happen in a small fraction of people. And I think that's enough. And I think if we happen to bring that awareness of being able to ask that question and look at the possibilities that it can co-create or it can create, then we got people that are actually doing more than just copying. Copying is a basis. It's a very, very, very fundamental basis, but then you build on top of that. And it's not surprising to me that copying is most of it, and the part of it that is actually changing it is different. Like, for example, how often do you brush your teeth? Have you changed the way you brush your teeth between the time you learned it at 3 or 4 or 5 years old to now? Has it changed? Has the way you wipe your butt changed? Have you actually consciously thought about how to optimize wiping your butt? How many squares, how you fold it, what strokes you use, how much pressure you use, how long to do it, blah, blah, blah. All these sort of things, right? I would venture to say most people do those things the way they were taught when they're in their single-digit years and probably haven't changed it very much. But those who have, can they buy things like, Japanese toilets with lots of different, electronic gadgets and stuff like that? So I'm really agreeing with the premise of the article, but I'm also suggesting that it misses the essence. Over.
So I actually commented on that article because I see what both of you are saying. For me, part of the challenge is that it would be great to copy and then each person inject their spark to what that is. And that's not always so easy to do. For example, Sam put up an article. It was a really good article, but there was one part that I thought was wrong. I thought it was jumping to a conclusion that wasn't there. But I passed it by because it wasn't worth the effort of putting the time in just to hear myself talk. Maybe this is a bad example, but I just think that sometimes I know from my experience, I've watched somebody do something and I've thought, oh, I could do this better. And then because I felt for some reason that I needed to ask permission, which I didn't, I understand that now, I didn't go ahead and make the change that might have worked better. And that's sort of still where I sometimes struggle now. I'm complete.
you mean then that you copy, well, you see someone else doing something, you think, how can I do this better? But you didn't actually do that change yourself? Was that what you mean?
Yes, that's what I mean. And I think a lot of average people are like that. Ordinary. I don't mean average, I mean ordinary.
I think that there's a problem in the education system where the scientific method is being devalued, so that children are finding it more difficult to make sense of the world when they come out of the classroom, because we all know that you learn more outside the classroom because you spend more time outside the classroom. But you've got to remember that the classroom is important if the children want to grow up and become successful at some field. Successful not only in their own personal life, but successful as a part of the growing community around them. And so we get...
I'm not picking on you, Alex. I think that's a valid point, but I would like you to clarify what you mean by the scientific method.
It's not copying. You're looking at somebody else's work, and if you find an error, you can reproduce it, copy it, and come up with a result. It's either results in a change or it doesn't. And that's how you uncover more truth in scientific method.
That sounds like research to me.
Yeah, well, it's a process, a continual process. It's ongoing. The scientists, the greatest value.
I will elucidate. All means of gathering information and data is that first we look at what it is we want to quantify and qualify, as Mr. Darwin went about doing a long time ago. And we reach a point where we can make some sense out of it, and we call that some sort of a hypothesis. So you have the idea, we have a hypothesis, then we try and put a theory out of it and test it to see if it stands up every single time. And if it stands up, it either becomes a law or it stays as a theory. But nevertheless, it has stood the tests. That is the scientific method. We all have been using the scientific method for a very long time. And out of those methodologies, we've had research and re-research and re-qualification systems.
Yes.
They too are valid.
It's copying.
When we use the word scientific methodology, we have to be exact and know what we're saying, and not just that any other method is defunct, it's useless, it doesn't stand the test of time. There are lots of things which science does not cover and does not want to cover, is unable to cover, and yet they still have stood the test of time. So one day, as is happening now, some of the scientific fraternity have started to turn their attention to those subjects and topics. No doubt, their brilliant minds will start putting programs and test systems together to take that further, which is happening. So let's not degrade and degenerate other systems. They've been running much longer than the scientific method, and they're still working, incomplete.
Well, if you think about it, it's an evolving thing. And it started as early as we started. It started as early as those chimpanzees started copying each other's behavior and learning from each other. So it's been here for eternity. The point I like about the scientific method is that you welcome somebody to come along and prove you wrong, because it results in discovery. Over.
Yeah, that's really good. I like that.
Hey, Colin, can you get closer to your microphone? You're coming through very, very low volume.
Low
For me,
volume.
anyway.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Maybe
Anybody
it's
else hearing
the
Colin
headset.
clearly? I'm not.
No, okay.
Yeah, Colin, while you fix that, let me add one more thought to two things, or two thoughts to two things that Jaswinder has expounded on today. One is this notion that there are some ideas or words that ought to, in some sense, be absolute, immutable, locked in, unchanging. I actually do disagree with that. And I think that fundamentally, if you do that, there's almost no possibility of learning on that particular thing. Can you still hear me? My computer says that I have problems. Okay, all right. So I do think that if we're going to be leaning in and allowing others to lean in, then we can clarify whatever concept that is. In your case, it was enlightenment, okay? Other people might say it's intuition. Other people might say it's syntony. Other people might say it's truth. And I think that there are barriers to learning, so long as you hold each of those as absolute, or any of those as absolute and unyielding to any further exploration or examination. So that's rejoinder number one. Rejoinder number two, and I see you shaking your head, so we can actually go at this if you'd like. Rejoinder number two is this notion of science doesn't want to address anything, or science can't address anything. I think that's BS. I think that is more talking about, let's say, current or past practitioners of what might be called the scientific method. In fact, I don't even believe it's that. I think it's those who hold some title in some institution with some funding that have decided that they want to do X versus Y. But that's not science. That's an individual. That's an organization. That's a special interest. That's not science. So don't use science to talk about those phenomena. Science to me is the pure essence of the scientific method, which is basically a learning mode, which is starting from copying. If I copy doing this and I produce the same result, okay, fine. If I change this and I see a slightly different result, okay, what can I hypothesize? What can I experiment with? Copying is fundamental to science. In fact, to verify someone else's scientific result, you have to copy that experiment and see if you get anything similar. So both of those rejoinders I would come back with and say, don't talk about science when you talk about motivation, because science has no motivation, okay? And then two, don't talk about...
One very short, quick question. Where in the university prospectus is listed the Department of Spirituality?
There is no such department. I mean, that's in computer science, by the way, there's things called type errors or category errors. And most people actually don't even understand how to start that conversation. But if you want to ascribe human behavior or human kinds of understanding to inanimate objects, be very, very careful. Because most times you're going to lead yourself to a possible conclusion which may be erroneous. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a notion of spirituality that means something to humans. Of course it does. So as long as you're creating your organization with your names for departments, absolutely there can be a place called Department of Spirituality. But that is not something that is outside the domain of science, in my belief, in my understanding. There's no way that you can actually say, okay, I'm going to wall this off and science cannot touch it. The only way you can say that is if you have no way to observe whatever's happening. And it used to be that way, that subjective experience was something we could not observe, but that is changing. That's changed in the last few decades. So that's why I think this whole statement of scientific method cannot apply to XYZ, that's only because you cannot observe XYZ.
As a whole decided that they would not touch that particular subject, that is written.
I think that's BS. No, I think that's BS. In fact, you cannot say that science has decided. You can say that the US institutions that fund science have done it, but you also know that that's not true, right? You know that there are secret programs that have done a lot. Look at.
I just came across this particular ditty accidentally, and that wasn't too long ago either. and I'm pretty sure I can probably find it again. And that science as a whole, when the scientific community was fairly.
Again, you're using that word science,
Yep.
and I believe you're using that word incorrectly.
Okay.
Okay, let me give
He's
Colin
using
and
it
Stacy a
in
chance to.
his
Go ahead.
way.
While Colin's mic's off, I'll just say really quickly that I would say that there is a bias among the people doing the science to stay away from those topics that would further explore spirituality or things that we can't see. So if you're not even designing the experiments, then how are you going to get more information?
Alex,
I
then Glenn, then me.
Yeah, there was a lot of spiritually minded scientists. I found a few on YouTube. Authors, famous authors. Over.
Okay,
Glenn?
so part of the vision is, let's say, real education then. So that's based on science, real science. Perhaps this doesn't exist. It's indicated. Perhaps the institutions that are called scientific aren't truly scientific at the moment. Perhaps this is more like an idea that's emergent, and yes, it's an important idea which stretch after it. So why isn't there a department of spirituality? Well, why isn't there a part of New York City which is called USA? Because New York City is a part of USA. Why isn't there a department of spirituality? Because science is a part of spirituality. Because spirituality is the seeing of what is, the direct perception of reality, and then the creating of a theory which depicts patterns and regularities is a result of the seeing of the natural phenomena in which those patterns and regularities take place. So what I'm getting towards is that spiritual practice is the practice of seeing what is. Scientific practice is based on the seeing of what is. And this is why it's sometimes called empirical, because it relates to the sense world, it relates to impressions, and it is subjective in some sense. And when many subjective experiences see similar patterns and regularities, this is where we get into the intersubjective. So this is why many people say that science doesn't have any clue about the objective, it only deals with the intersubjective. So, okay, so far so good then. So do we see some things that are very typical of, let's say, scientific thinking or the mentality? Well, obviously, truthfulness. So Sam said something interesting earlier, that it's based on copying. Yeah, on student stage. So I was wondering, what does Sam mean by that? Does that mean that it's based on me copying in my mind a representation of the pattern or regularity of the impressions I receive from the outside world? In the sense that I'm trying to have an inner representation which is similar to the patterns of the real world. That would also be a kind of copying. So, well, that's so there's empirical observation, there's a sort of copying or a sort of seeing of patterns, and then there's testing certain things, predicting what will happen. Yes, so that's a few of the themes, raising a lot of questions. Yeah, Stacy, I'm finished with that.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the human component of being either or yes, no, or it has to be like this, it has to be like that. And the example I want to use is the power of prayer. So in the medical field, we know that there's a real placebo effect. We know that actual changes happen even though nothing physically is changed. We know other people believe that there's a power in prayer. Where is the attempt to see what physical things may be going on in both that make the two overlap rather than disagree with it? And why is it so important to go ahead, Sam, jump right in. Jump right in.
No, please finish, but I do want to respond to this.
I just want to say, who is to say that there's not something real in the amount of energy that each person praying is putting out that actually changes something physically in the air that creates different conditions? And if a scientist were to say that, and I've spoken to scientists off the record that maybe feel that way, but they would not say that in their scientific groups because it would legitimize them in the minds of some other people.
Or
So
illegitimate.
that's what, however, that's, you got my point. So that's what I'm trying to say. And when I keep saying, you know, why can't we twist something? That has nothing to do with putting the truth away. Both are still the truth, but let's find the parts that do not contradict each other, because that's the part that's really important, not the spin that a person would put on it.
So may I?
Absolutely.
I think this you bring up a good question about prayer. And in fact, prayer is akin to meditation. And I know that there's been a lot of studies already done on meditation. You know, Matthew Ricard is one example. Lots of other people are other examples. Harvard Medical School, in fact, has studied meditation and Tai Chi, and even other schools have done very similar things. Eastern medicine, for example, whether or not you choose to believe whether or not their foundations are scientific or not, it's certainly been, let's say, experimental through many dozens of generations. So they have learned things that seem to work and seem to apply well and not yet be fundamentally grounded in scientific or chemical or biological science. That doesn't detract from whether or not it seems to work, okay? And the more you actually take such phenomena and you evolve and lean in and try to explore it, the more you close that gap between what you see and what science can explain. And I'll say acupuncture is something like that, right? Used to be, you know, acupuncture used to be laughed at. And now more and more people are understanding some of the phenomena inside human bodies that may explain a little bit of what happens in acupuncture. So I think this whole idea that science is not willing or not able is too anthropomorphic, okay? You can't speak about science the way you speak about humans. Humans may be unwilling because of their long-held strong beliefs. But you take a look at some of the most envelope-pushing scientists out there, like, for example, the Large Hadron Collider. You know what they're really trying to figure out? They're trying to see if they can spot God's signature somewhere in either the cosmological constants or, you know, prime numbers, or in patterns of prime numbers, or in the number 137. They're trying to understand that. So long as we can still push the boundaries of our knowledge and understanding, we're still evolving as a species. And I'll go back to one other point that I think I heard Alex kind of allude to, which is there have been many things that religion used to teach us that we now understand better via scientific phenomena. But the other side, which is what has science explained well, that religion came back and said, oh, I can explain this better. It's an interesting question to me. I can't say it's zero, but right now my understanding is very, very little. There may be only one, and I'm holding that one as a thing that just went there and believes it. And it's still okay. But I think you can still lean into it with science. It is not invalid for science to ask that question. Over.
Do you want to go, Stacey?
No, it's all right. You can go.
I'm thinking about the balance of the yin and the yang, getting it in harmony. And that's a practice that benefits any human being, no matter what state of mind or religion they might follow, the scientists or laymen, or church preachers. So they understand the practices. Practice of prayer is akin to the practice of meditation. And so there's a meeting of minds between the East and the West on that subject. We all get this placebo effect and healthy effect by thinking positive thoughts. There's an association between healthy mind, healthy body. So it's.
Yeah, I think there's something here. Could there be that?
That's another thing I would like to throw up as something that needs clarifying. The word mind. What is the mind? Where is it? How does it exist? Can science explain that one? Complete.
It seems that it can't. I have a little question. I'll just throw this in as well. Yes, here it is. Because you said, does religion explain anything? Perhaps the whole purpose of religion isn't explaining, but transforming people.
Whoa, Hoshi, whoa!
But
I have not mentioned religion at all.
No, I know. Okay, let me then. I'll rephrase it. I'll say spiritual. Spiritual practices. Yeah, I'll call it spiritual practices instead. But here's the question. Just see if I don't lose it. Well, okay, it'll come back. But okay, here's certainly a note to self. We should stick to one line of thought at once. No, here it is. It's simple. Prayer is something that changes reality, right? So is this something, let's say with scientifically minded people, or let's say rationally minded people, tend to not give consideration to the creative factor of our beliefs? So that if I pray that I want to be a better person, then that prayer might in itself change me. So it's a belief which isn't a belief of a passive observer of a reality that's out there. It's belief of an active participant, where the belief itself participates in changing reality. So that is perhaps something that scientifically minded people, whatever that might mean, might be blind to or tend to overlook. That the perception of reality changes reality there and then. So that's also, I want to throw that in because I felt that was behind what Stacey brought about prayer, for example. Prayer is an example of something that might change actively who I am.
I'm not sure about the point, but I think this notion of observation changing reality has been around for decades. So I'm not sure whether or not that's still a valid critique.
As far as I'm concerned, an observer just observing, for argument's sake, an invigilator in an exam room, all that invigilator does is sit and observe, changes the behavior of the students, wherever age they are, and that's all that happens. If I pray for something and it does not happen in my lifetime, that does not preclude the option that it may not happen after my lifetime. If I pray for something personal to me and it happens immediately, say within the next few hours, that's mind-blowingly good. Or that it happens at a slightly later date or a prearranged timing, that's mind-bogglingly good. So, does the mind come into play into that, in that that information is broadcast and received somewhere, and the appropriate changes to be made are programmed and put into action at the appropriate time? That would be mind-bogglingly good. And we've got a parrot doing the parroty things again. So how do we start to observe these things? How do we even get to talk to people who can say, yes, that's happened to me? And I asked, and it happened. But on the other hand, let's not take prayer to the other extreme and say, which I've heard say, that a particular sage or a particular godly person has stopped God from destroying the planet Earth by pleading with that particular deity to plead on behalf of population of God with the population of Earth with God not to destroy Earth. I think in that particular congregation, the few times he said that, he was soon shot down, which is appropriate. So prayer has its uses and its limitations. And one other thing I would like to point out of prayer is that there are societies who were enslaved, and for hundreds of years they prayed to God for a savior. And lo and behold, a savior came and saved them and took them to somewhere else. And I'm not just talking about a particular region, I'm talking about several regions here, which shall remain nameless. I will be honest, for a change, I have done a fair amount of research, and a lot of it I've forgotten, but the information is still there and available and relevant. I'm complete.
You're muted.
Okay, so if I expound a little bit on what you're saying, again, I find little to disagree with there. The kind of prayer that you're talking about that is potentially not prayer with perhaps a capital P is, let's say, the prayer that accompanies virgin sacrifice, or the prayer that accompanies, requests for gods to smite one's enemies on the battlefield. Now, here's another question I'd like to ask you. After weeks and weeks and weeks of fires burning in Australia, do you ascribe the rain to prayer? Because weather changes. Some days it doesn't rain, some days it does rain. When it does rain, are we going to say, oh, all of our, collective prayers are answered? It could be, it couldn't be. But right now, we don't really understand how that happens.
Just a quick interjection there. For a long time, we have asked to know about the earthly systems that are running. And now we are getting first-hand knowledge of earthly systems, and we're recording them. That is the prayer that is being answered succinctly and complete.
I
That's
wanted,
fascinating points.
I just want to go back to the whole science thing and to say to Sam that, but it's people that are making the decisions about what's getting researched. And so if in a small room like this, we're laughing at certain things without really thinking about them, that's going to scale up to decision makers on where we put the money in research. When it comes to prayer, I would like to know things like, does it make a difference if you pray out loud? Is the sound of the word going to have an effect if it's spoken out loud as opposed to it's in your mind? Does it make a difference how many people are doing it? What are the differences? Like, I want to see, I want to get to the real small things that would get lost.
It makes a difference. I
Who
know
do you
that
want?
for my
Who
own
do you want to
experience.
take that question, Stacy?
Actually, before I put a question, I'm going to say one more thing which ties into a theme that I'm always talking about. So for a long time, I was really interested in the power of music, and I still am. Part of what I see as a problem is the way people get divided off. So for example, I don't play any musical instrument. So I had to go and find people that were musically inclined. And then when I would ask my questions, those weren't ones they were interested in. The same with science. If you have certain people doing the work that tend not to have the same kind of imaginative question, so to speak, and they look at things differently, you're not even going to get the project started to look at certain things. So another reason that we need more diversity. Now I'm complete. I have no questions.
Glenn, did you want to go? Because I do want to go.
Yeah, just on the last thing there, you can wonder why isn't there a department of possibility, for example? And, who does the science of possibility, of co-visioning? I think we have to do it because nobody else does.
Okay, I'll be way, way, way more enthusiastic about that question, okay? In that if you're doing anything original, if you're doing anything that's creating out of what has not been explored before, you're going to get that initial dissonance. You're going to get people in quote unquote those areas that you think this should apply to. They're going to say, never thought about it, not interested. And if you go and do that often enough and you get that response often enough, you should actually thank yourself, in my opinion, because now you're onto something. Now you're pushing the boundaries of something that nobody else has ever thought. You're able to start putting together ideas that maybe other people haven't put together. And then you actually start thinking about, hey, is this new? Is this novel? Is it useful? Is it something worth spreading? Idea worth spreading. Yeah, start a TED Talk, you know. So I think that's a clue that you're onto something, okay? So I think rather than being discouraged, you should actually be encouraged if you meet with those kind of results. Over. Alex, you wanted to go? Colin,
Yeah.
did you fix your mic?
Is it fixed?
Yeah, we can hear you clearly now. But Alex, did you want to go first?
I was going to say something about the mindfulness, the fact that our emotions create serotonin and different neurotransmitting chemicals in our brain. And if we live in a life of exciting adventure every day for weeks on end, we end up crashing. It's like that manic depressive illness. When you're high for too long, you crash. The chemicals are not processing. So there's a balance to be made, and that's where the balance comes into with the yin and yang process, or the active practice of a daily regime of meditation. It's a balancing tool to help maintain some semblance of sanity in a crazy world. Simple as that. But it is worth taking note of that fact that the emotional triggers that we allow ourselves when we experience joy and anger and love and fear, these are the things that create our relative experience of reality and daily life in all our affairs. And improving on that is the task each of us undertake each day. We share our experience with each other about whether or not one thing's working and things you've tried that don't work. it makes you sad to see people trying things that you've already tried and you know to lead down a path of darkness and shadows and difficulty. Over.
I'd just like to try a little something practical when Stacy comes back. She's going off somewhere, so I'll wait.
In the meantime, I did think of something.
Just how to get a blanket.
Oh, I got my blanket right here.
I'll wait. All yours, Sam.
Stacy, while you put your thoughts together, I wanted to respond to one thing that just Winder did ask, and that is, what is the mind? Okay, short form of the answer, I don't know. Okay, but the commonly expected usage of that term seems to be whatever that is that holds our ideas, that holds our thoughts. That seems to be the common way people use that word. Okay, now, are we getting close to understanding whether that has any physical manifestation? I think we do. I think we do get close. You lop off somebody's frontal lobe and, less thoughts actually, get expressed. That doesn't mean they're not actually being held, but, the ability to express them seems to diminish with more and more of the brain that you lop off. So I think there's some correlation there. But as far as an actual true understanding and, really deep phenomenological explanation, I don't think we have that yet. On the other hand, it's close to the science that is currently being practiced. The fact that we don't understand how proteins fold, how DNA folds, how quantum effects, happen in such distances with such intricacies over thousands and trillions, actually trillions of synapses and nerves. That's a phenomenon that really emerges out of this systemic complexity. And so we're still in a nascent stage of understanding it. But again, it's not something you can say science cannot study this. Science can very definitely study this. That was really my main point. Over.
Has anybody here used the program called the web page creation tool from Squarespace? I saw an ad, a very impressive ad for Squarespace, targeting newbies, people with no programming experience whatsoever. Create your wonderful website.
I intend to try that. I quite like the sound of it, but they're very expensive, so I will try, see how easy it is to create a one-page website. Okay, when we're ready, everybody relax. And those with doggies, put them down, please. We're going to do something practical, which won't last long. Pay attention to your own breathing. Does anybody know how many times a minute we breathe? It's an open mic. Everybody can have their mic open.
15,
3 to 10 times.
Breathing rate per minute.
15
Average.
in the library 15 times, in the gym 26 times.
So
I'm
your
doing Tai Chi
resting
about 3 or
rate
4
is
times.
15. Your resting
Maybe
rate
less.
is 15.
Twice.
Yeah? Say again?
When doing Tai Chi and meditation, it can be as low as twice a minute, 2 or 3 times.
Wow. Great. So what we'll do here is, when we've normalized our breathing rate to the resting rate, take a deep breath and hold. Relax, Alex, relax. Arms, hands down. Put your palms, hands down on your thighs. Relax. For once in your life, let's clear your mind. Relax. Close eyes gently, very gently. Breathe. Feel the breath on the bridge between the nose and the upper lip. On the count of 3, breathe in deeply and hold to the count of 10, slowly. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in. Breathe in deeply so that your anus is pushing out. Hold, count. And remember everything. Exhale slowly. Open eyes gently. Come back gently. Any comments? How do you feel?
Suddenly something changed a lot right before the end there. It was a noticeable change in my energy.
Were you in less or more control?
Oh, felt good when it happened.
We can do it again and again. That's the beauty of it. The scientific method is a wonderful thing. So,
I feel like I've got more control, so much control that no answer is warranted. No answer is necessary immediately.
then why did you answer?
Because that was the fact I wanted out in the open at that moment. I live in the moment, Jess. I live in the now.
I understand, but never mind. So these are some of this is one of the practices that have been practiced for a long, long, long time. And I'm talking about thousands of years. When I started on the research, interreligious research on the spiritual aspects, I was pleasantly surprised that it isn't just the lower 60, 70, 80% that agree on their ethics and ideologies, that the spiritual levels are pretty much agreeable as well. There are slight differences in the modus operandi, but, or hence, they are all designed to take the individual on a collective journey which leads to the individual's enlightenment. And at the same time, embodying into that a particular kind of morality that should be a cohesive, compassionate, caring, sharing ethos of life. And there are lots of reasons why that doesn't come about in reality, but that's a whole different field, and we call that resources and territory, and for want of a better word, the ego. So, shall we do that one again? Yes, Colin.
Can I ask a question first?
Colin is
Go ahead,
first.
Sam. Well, I'll concede to Sam.
Yes, Sam.
Whether
This is
anyone
the time we have available is a luxury, and it's best afforded to the people who have contributions they want to get off their chest. Probably.
That means you're wasting Sam's time and everybody else's, Alex. They're waiting to speak, and you interrupted them. I love this. I really like you, Sam. Alex.
Yeah, Sam, what was the question?
My
I
question
think you had
is,
something.
was that an experience that was new for anyone?
Say
What
again?
you just asked us to do. Was that a new experience for anyone?
It's new under the circumstances.
It was a new experience, which also had familiarity with many other experiences. So it was totally new, and it had familiarity with a series of very interesting experiences from the past.
There are people around the world who actually use holding the breath method of achieving enlightenment and not much else. And there are lots of other practices that people do on their own. And then there are the combination of practices that people use to achieve the same end. And then there are experiences and meditations and all the other methods used to not only live and be useful to whole of society, and then to spread out and spread those methodologies so that everybody starts to get something out of the whole program instead of somebody just sitting there doing it on his or her own. Okay, now, once one person starts on one of these programs, and we normally term that a religion because a deity or deities are involved, it tends to run true for a few hundred years. And then because the input is not there anymore, the true input, it tends to drift off and become something other than where it started. And even in those places where the input can be maintained, it isn't. Because people, well, for various reasons, they don't participate. They drop out once they reach the high levels. They can't be bothered, or it's too much trouble, or they can't take the criticisms from people who know nothing about it, but will jabber the same inane comments over and over again. Give us a miracle, walk on the water. Those two keep coming to mind. Or, well, it's sort of occurs to me that unless we all do the same things and have similar experiences, and we have common knowledge base, that's what we look for, how can we talk about these things if we don't have that commonality?
Which starts by copying. Yeah, Colin.
Exactly, yeah.
We have the documents, and we have the desire to learn.
I can only see a square of 4 here today, so I'm gonna go ahead. I assume did you say go ahead, Sam?
Yes, please.
ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, so much has been said, and yet I'm still looking at the main context of why we're here. And I had a thought earlier that if it's about a way of doing governance, which I established with Sam a couple of Saturdays ago.
May I just quickly interrupt you and give you a little path because I know you were a little bit late. We got here because we got here because we were talking about truth, and we were talking about experience, and then we were talking about spirituality. So I think this is kind of still in the greater service, but that's why we're in this little tributary of conversation. Over. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I think that's great that all the large questions are being asked, the hard question, even today, of consciousness. And, I think most people here have heard quite a bit about it from one respect or another. I can't speak for everybody. But if the overall barn raising is governance building, ways to coexist, trying to find a little more structure where necessary to move forward in things, more project-based if we so choose. But it's kind of wide open just to define what we're doing still at this point in time. As I don't think anybody could stumble across a group and have a clue what we're doing. And I'm just wondering if the word really isn't forming a new politic with, choosing our own language here, but using the language as it's intended, not the way that we've been molded to use it as. And I think we should have our dictopedia of 150 words that we say most often, and let's define them. And, offline, and if we can come to some sort of agreement, it could make certain conversation on the rails officially easier. And then if you want to use the word differently in other circles, which people do and will, then that's fine. Theory, hypothesis, all that jazz, prayer, meditation, spirituality, religion, blah, blah, blah. There's so many different, we could spend the rest of our days just discussing those terms.
Well, there's a couple of words in there which you might want to put in your dictionary. One of them is a blah, 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 and all that jazz. I object to.
Well, it has a place.
If you're going to put up a governance model and you're accusing others.
Let me ask you a question because I know I'm interrupting. Colin was making a point, and I believe you found it necessary to interrupt.
Yes.
So what I was curious is, what point were you trying to make that was worth interrupting Colin's statement?
Well, Colin didn't do any of the practice that we did today. And on the one previous occasion, I asked others to do it. He didn't do it then. And he's calling the whole practice jazzy and a blah, blah, blah. Okay?
I think you misinterpreted.
And he wants to put words together that he has not experienced, that we use.
No, I'll let you have your space. I'm not stepping in your space. No, you keep your space. That's fine. In fact, I did have something to say about that. But before I say anything in a particular branch of our investigations and questioning, which one is meditation, which is not religion for you.
It's not meditation as per se. You were late. You haven't understood it. We are looking at increasing our individual awareness, how to become more aware internally and externally.
So this is an interesting moment. This is an interesting moment. I'm going to meta because something happened. Okay, Jaswinder, you tried to get us to do an experiment, and interestingly, you didn't ask people whether or not that was appropriate. You actually just said do it. Okay, and then after we did it, Colin made a statement, and you felt that he was, I guess, dismissing or devaluing something that you were doing, which I didn't actually understand him to be saying. I didn't make that correlation. Okay. So you did interrupt him to correct something which I didn't understand. And then while Colin was trying to still say, okay, fine, I'm not criticizing you, you were still coming on strong, saying that that was
just by saying I'm not criticizing you does not mean to say he's not being a critique by using derogatory words.
But
you may be offended. You may be offended by what I say, but I wasn't intending to offend you.
I'm not offended at all. I'm enormously grateful to you for bringing it up. It's
Jaswinder pointed out two specific words which possibly could easily be eliminated.
Kind of like refusing to taste something and saying, I don't like it. My toddler does that by looking at something. Oh, I don't like that.
Again, you're speaking in my space, but I
didn't participate. You didn't clear your mind at all where others did. And now you run off. You did that last week as well. When Alex
You're
interrupted.
also complicating things, Jaswinder, because Sam asked you what your alternative was. So then you said, after a long thing about what it wasn't, you then came
Alternative
into
to what? Hold on. Alternative to what?
to everything you pointed out. For example, an alternative to the blah blah blah, an alternative to using those terms. And then, after mentioning what it wasn't, you then came to what it was.
Hold on a second.
And what it was. I don't want to go away from that.
Hold on a second. Let's ask Sam if he asked that question.
I find it curious that you feel so strongly about this, Jaswinder, that you are interrupting almost every speaker.
I find it curious that if somebody objects to a particular something that we were doing and then uses words which have no particular meaning and then starts accusing me in particular and all those gathered of not knowing what we're doing.
It's called an ad hominem attack.
So wait. I'd like to get a sense from the rest of us five.
Last time this sort of thing happened, the words that we used were slightly different, but this has happened before. And I'm ever so glad to see that the words have changed.
Jaswinder, may I ask a question? At the time that Colin was making a statement, and I'm particularly asking Alex and Stacy and Glenn, I personally didn't get the sense that Colin was criticizing what Jaswinder was saying. Do the rest of you feel that Colin was criticizing?
I heard Colin put several things in the same bag, including religion and spirituality, and you can't do that. That always causes issues. Over.
What I heard Jaswinder say was that Colin didn't practice it at that moment, and that, of course, he would know best, but it might be that he didn't, for example, practice co-visioning at that moment, because before Colin came in, we sort of had this thing that today we're going to practice co-visioning, and that's also why we went down this line of looking into psychology and what it is that can change our psychology and change our mind and consciousness and ultimately behavior and being that everything depends on. So that's the connection between the line that we were sort of following and the co-visioning document, which is the larger context. When Colin spoke, I felt that he mentioned some other things. It wasn't so much that it was criticism, but it was maybe at least a departure from that practice, for example.
I was into a category.
Can I hear from Stacey?
I was into a category. Okay, go ahead, Stacey.
Yeah, so this issue between Jaswinder and Colin has a history of many conversations that are similar to this. And to his credit, it felt to me like Colin was trying to be conscious of that and trying to be careful of the words that he used. However, once he used the blah, 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 blah sort of has an agreed upon meaning of not important, not important, not important. So again, I don't think he purposely tried to do that. And I actually think he was trying not to do that. But, how you feel.
It was just another very helpful word, right?
First of all, I was only half done what I was saying, but continue on. Go ahead, Alex.
This is helpful to think about. Our DNA has a code, and it's like 4 letters, and this code reproduces itself over and over in our DNA. The cells reproduce, it gets passed on from cell to cell all throughout the body, and the organs know what cells to create because they read this code. It's almost as if it was created by some intelligence.
Alex, can you connect that to the question, please?
This link between fantasy, religious fantasy and superstition and modern spirituality, new age religion.
Personal limitation, but where's the response to the question I was really asking that was addressing this meta point about how we're conducting this conversation.
Well, the divide between Jaswinder and Colin is one of evolve versus creation,
I don't see it that way.
nurture or nature.
No.
I don't see it that way either.
No.
Well, the DNA. How do you explain this code? This four-letter code in the DNA?
We don't need to.
Is it accidental?
Question for a
Okay.
different time, in my estimation.
You have the xylem, you have the phloem, two different.
Forget about it. Forget it. Go ahead, Sam.
In a
Continue on.
biological.
Okay, guys, I'm going to try and bring a little bit of my my request that we actually have some focus. I think these questions about whether or not adenine, cytosine, thymine, guanine, all that sort of stuff doesn't have, in my opinion, a direct relevance to the question that's being asked here. The question I'm asking here is when Colin made his statement, and it could potentially be, okay, so I'm not going to accuse him, but it could be taken as a little bit derogatory or a little bit, let's say, sloppy. But even if it is it necessary to trigger and interrupt at that point?
No,
I mean, I
it's
could be
not.
accused of being sloppy and possibly derogatory at times, and yet people can still wait till I'm done before responding. So I'm just kind of curious whether or not any statement that potentially could be either sloppy or derogatory needs an immediate intervention. That's what I'm asking. Because I don't think we yet have a code of conduct here, but I am trying to think about how we evolve towards one. So Stacy and then Jaswinder, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think this would have been a good idea, Jaswinder. In this case, I think it would have been good for you to go inside and figure out where that trigger was coming from, sort of like the work that Gertrude was doing that unfortunately I missed yesterday. And that's not to say that I don't recognize and think there is validity in what you're getting upset about. But what I am saying is you're pulling a whole bunch of baggage along with you into this moment for this situation. And for the purposes of how to run better conversations, this might be a good example of when someone has to step back, take those breaths, and figure out what's going on with me.
Thanks, Stacy. Jaswinder?
Thank you. When we did a code of practice, code of conduct a long time ago, I did say that I would reserve interruptions. I would interrupt if I felt it necessary. So that's in our code of practices. And the reason I gave at that time is still a valid reason. If somebody starts putting so many items together and then they don't tally, and then to come back to them, and I've said that about somebody else as well, and cut them again to get to the point where I felt triggered becomes extremely difficult. And there's so many else things already into that situation. It's kind of like correcting somebody you're teaching, and if you correct that one in a whole sequence, it might be the only thing that is not quite right or it needs changing. And if you do it there and then, and the interruption is very short, it's very quick, and it doesn't upset the flow too much. Okay? So I disagreed with that sequence just on that point. And everybody else jumps in with their own
I got a vision of that kind of a
Stacey's hand is
situation
up,
arising.
and Jaswinder's not done yet.
I think I was in the middle of my of
Yes,
saying something when I got
That
interrupted.
was a long time ago,
So-
Colin. I still remember that. Okay.
Yeah. Well, what the hell was I talking about?
Stacey, then Glenn, Colin.
So having
Jump.
made my
How many
objection-
times? How many times have I been passed up? How many times have I been passed up, Jazz? Come on now.
Can we
This
go
is like
Jaswinder,
today.
Stacy, Glenn, then back to Colin, please?
So
This is ridiculous.
now, of course it's ridiculous because you came in late and then you're telling
Don't
us.
start that with me. I've been here for 2 years. I'm contributing. I know what's going on. I was
Today
listening to the
you
whole
came
thing.
in late.
I
Today
was
you
just
came
in the
in
middle
late.
of a sentence. Look, I guess I'm like the fourth on the
This
line
is
to
no
go up
longer
the
constructive
playground.
and
So
civil,
here,
in
hold
my
on.
opinion. Okay, if we can please get back to some structure, please. So, Colin, I would like for you to finish your statement, but let's hear the interjection first from
Right.
Jaswinder, then
The other thing I would
Jaswinder,
like to
Stacey, then
reiterate
Glenn,
at this
then back to
stage,
you, okay?
the other thing I would like to reiterate at this stage is that in the GCC, all subjects and topics should and must remain open for discussion. So if somebody starts being derogatory about a particular topic or a subject, then that obviously means it has to be addressed.
No, I have
Either
something I have
then
to
or
say, and then you can
later
go to the rest
or
of the
later.
speak.
Colin, please, can we go in order? Okay? Can we please
No,
do this?
I would like to interrupt. Like the judge
Otherwise, we're
said,
going to
it's
go and
important.
keep digging into sidetracks, and we're not going to have
No,
a
I don't want sidetracks. I just want to say when I was
You and
saying blah, blah,
Jaswinder
blah,
are both triggered. We recognize that, okay?
I'm not triggered. I've
Yes,
been
you
waiting
are.
4
Look at
times to
your
talk.
face, Colin.
I think I've been waiting 4 times. I know what I want to say. I've been waiting 4 times to say it.
I'm trying to
Everybody's
tease
gone
out
lots of times.
why we actually had this intervention.
Yeah,
And then
well,
we
I
wanna
wasn't
get back
finished
to
what I
you.
was saying. And if I don't finish what I'm saying, you're having an intervention with half of me there. That's all I'm saying.
I'm not actually doing this necessarily for your benefit, Colin. I'm doing this for the group benefit.
Yeah, well, then I'll take the sacrifice of not being able to speak for the group benefit. Sure.
No, you will be able to speak, but I want us to be able to speak without interruption.
So say it
Just
now
are you
then,
finished?
Colin.
I
Colin
was the
had
one
something you
interrupted.
wanted
Right.
to say.
Okay, Stacey.
Can't you just say it,
My-
Colin?
Wait a
What
minute,
I
wait a
what
minute,
I
wait a minute.
wanted.
People don't seem
Okay.
to want a moderator in this conversation. People want this to go randomly, and I think we've tried that for 2.5 years. I'm trying to bring a little bit of moderation to this, and it's been difficult because people don't actually want that moderation, okay? So if people don't want that moderation, we can go back to what we've been doing for 2.5 years. But we found that that's been frustrating for a lot of people. And yet, we're still in this mode where people feel we have to interrupt each other. And this is why I felt very strongly about interruptions, okay? I understand the exceptional case, but today has not been the exceptional case. Today has been very frequent. So if we're not going to recognize that and hold ourselves accountable, then what are we doing here? So I would request that Jaswinder finish a small statement. Stacey, please go. Glenn, you go. And then Colin, I'd like to give you a lot of time then for you to finish your opening statement before, which I understand you haven't completed yet. Can we please do this? Jaswinder, please.
I don't really have much else to say, Sam, except that I still will reserve the right to interrupt,
Okay.
even if the trigger is very mild. And you may or may not be aware of the history between Colin and I. We had one heck of a humdinger a long time ago, albeit. And really cross accusations, I'm not making any. All I'm saying is that all subjects and all topics must remain open for discussion and or practice. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere.
Okay, so I agree. Point made. Is it okay then to move to Stacey now? Okay, Stacey.
Okay, so I really empathize with where Colin is coming from right now, because he was interrupted in a way that I don't think was the best way. What I was going to ask, which I think is what Colin wants, I would have said, Colin, you're not paying attention. Colin, I'm talking to you. You're muted. I know, but I'm going to be asking you a question, and if you're doing something else, you're not going to hear it.
He's on another call.
So the way that I think an interruption, and again, I'm trying to be more general, I would have said, Colin, what do you mean by blah, blah, blah? Instead of assuming I knew based on all my past interactions, I would have said, what do you mean by blah, blah, blah? And I get the sense from Colin that he's been waiting to tell us.
Okay, Glenn? Or Stacey, are you done? Glenn?
Yeah. Yeah. The vision I have is one where, first of all, we would probably not say blah, blah, blah. And if it is said, then one person will say, and everyone will know immediately what they meant, and we're straight back to the co-visioning. Okay, remember why we're here. So my vision is that we would move straight back there instead of sort of taking a half an hour of saying many obvious things that we've done now. Yeah. So now I'd love to hear what Colin
Okay.
wanted to say.
So Colin, if you're still there, you're given this opportunity to finish your statement and address your original point if you like, or any of the other points that people have been trying to make.
You're muted.
Well, he's muted, but he's not speaking either. Okay.
Yeah, no technical difficulties. I think my phone is in low mode. Let's see here. There. Having lots of trouble. I think when I was indicating to Stacy
Can I interrupt?
listening.
Is it okay?
Sure, go ahead.
I
No, we
wanted to
did
say,
agree that Colin would speak next, please. Colin, do you want to go?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is very interesting. So I get called out on blah, 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 when I was actually within that string. If you go back, it wasn't just religion and prayer. It was also scientific method, hypothesis, theory, law.
Colin, are you ready to speak? You appear frozen. I think Colin is frozen.
all right, I want to just say that it is a disruptive experience to have people not following the general agreement and rules. They'll raise a hand if you want to interrupt. Over.
Well, I think these are recommendations. We haven't actually formally, in any sense, agreed. We've actually opted in to our own code of conduct. And that's what the spreadsheet is. So it's useful to be cognizant of who says, hey, I'm willing to be interrupted, or people who say, yes, I reserve the right to interrupt at times if I need to. So that's why I really wanted to do that spreadsheet, is so that we could actually understand each other. Okay. Yes, I think, a visual indicator is useful. But not everybody's agreed to that. So I believe Colin has at least shut off his video. So we're not going to hear from him at the moment, it looks like. In fact, he's left the session altogether. Okay, so I'd just like to recap, okay? I think we had each been having a conversation. Colin was making a statement. He said something in a way that didn't seem appropriate to Jaswinder. Jaswinder interrupted. There was a back and forth that evidently has some history, and then various people have various interpretations of that. And I'm going to say something possibly a little bit triggering. I believe both Jaswinder and Colin got triggered at those points then. And then we each get to be explaining all of that. So that's my brief overview, incomplete recap of what I saw and heard. Anybody else have any thoughts on what just happened?
And can we then go back to co-visioning, please? I would love that.
Yes, which I think is what Jaswinder was doing with his meditation, what we were all doing with previous discussions about truth and meditation and subjective and mind and spirituality and all that. Yes, I agree. That's what was driving or drove us towards this moment.
Because before that,
when I changed the method of breathing when I was meditating, and it made a lot of difference. I went from breathing any which way that I felt comfortable with to specifically breathing in through the nose and breathing out through the mouth. Each time you do that, you're humidifying the sinuses and what have you, and taking in the humidified air, breathing it out through your mouth, keeping your throat moist, prevents a dry throat. So that's just a little tip. Over.
Well, may I respond to that? it's curious that when I do this because I've been taught differently. Okay, two things which may not have been brought out, and I don't even know if you do this, just Winder. Number one is I was taught to do this because I do this as a part of Tai Chi, which came out of martial practice. And so the idea here is as you breathe in, you don't breathe in to expand your chest and lungs. You breathe in Tai Chi to expand your belly. So you actually let your diaphragm expand when you breathe in, and then your belly swells up. And also in Tai Chi, we do not expel air through the mouth. We breathe in and out both through the nose. That may be different from what other people do as well. Okay? And part of the reason for that is definitely due to the history of Tai Chi. You don't want your mouth open, so in the moment of conflict or battle, anybody can grab it and stick something in it or whatever. Okay, so there's definitely a history to why breathing in Tai Chi is different, perhaps, than breathing in other practices. But this belly breathing, I think, has become, in my understanding, more common, even though this nose breathing may not be. That was just something I thought I'd lay on the table over. Just wonder.
The breathing down into the belly.
For the record, Colin is back. Over. But just wonder, please go.
Breathing down into the belly is to compress and decompress the whole intestine, which obviously is moving the food through itself and the digestive system. Breathing through the nose, if it's cold air you're breathing in, it's warmed and it's cleaned by the sinus. If it's hot air you're breathing in and out, then obviously it's the other way around. So it's a heat exchange mechanism and it's a cleaning mechanism. When we run, we're generating a fair amount of heat. And then you normally start breathing through the mouth, in and out through the mouth. That has a cooling effect. And also it takes a lot of the moisture out via the lungs rather than trying to recover the moisture and the heat through the sinus. So that's my understanding of it. And the other thing that changed the breathing system is the military fashion, and that is to stand up straight, erect, expand your chest out, boys. Come on, get your chest out and keep it out. Put your chin up and breathe that way. And that's totally derogatory to the whole digestive heart-lung system. It does weird things to the body, but it seems that the military want that chest-out business to look proud and well-formed soldiers. So there are things that are good for practicing, and there are practices which are bad for us, but we're still doing them, and that's why we're here. We're discussing these items. I'm complete.
It's like birds and other animals that swell up in order to scare away their enemies, right? It doesn't actually ground you. It doesn't actually make you more balanced. It doesn't make you stronger. In fact, it makes you more unbalanced when you swell up and you take all this, chest area, as opposed to this roundness of shoulders and this grounding and sinking into the ground, which is something you learn in martial practice. So I'm echoing what you say. Yeah, Alex.
Can we let Colin go?
Well, Colin is back, so let's that's a good practice. So let's say, Alex, before you go, let me ask, Colin, do you want to finish your statement now that you're back? I'll give you going once.
Yeah.
Going twice.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes,
we can hear you, but we cannot see you.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's because
we
my
cannot
phone
see
died.
You.
Yeah, I don't have my phone, so you don't see me, right? Okay. So yeah, I was in the middle of trying to context. Wasn't in the middle of judging anybody. In fact, I was asking Sam a leading question, if we were getting on towards something that is more as a vision, something that's political in its cloak. And the blah, blah, blah was to shorten a long-winded thing, like Sam went into detail about some things that we learn when we're younger. And do we keep doing those? And then he went into a description where I just said blah, blah, blah to save time, but that didn't work. So I do think that I'm disappointed in Jazz thinking I was belittling what he's talking about. That's total cognitive bias. Stacy said I clear that up by asking, what do you mean by blah, 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 which is a beautiful thing. Thank you, Stacy, because that's exactly what he needed to do, not assume. And Sam said he also assumed that we were going to do the exercise when my point about the meditation was I think I've been naturally meditating for quite some time and becoming more self-aware of that mind-body presence and realizing that ever since I was a kid, I've probably been meditating my own Tai Chi or whatever you call it. So to stop and put a model that I have to do in order to get the most effective Jazz method is just one option I have. At that particular moment, I wasn't into that. I didn't ask for that. And I was involved in some other things, but I was being more aware and conscious, and I had a similar effect as other people in the room. So to assume that I wasn't participating was wrong. And I assume Sam participated without dropping the dog as well, which is very much the same. If we weren't full participants, that's to your disappointment. And if you're offended, that's something that triggers you. You should question why you're offended. And being offensive isn't such a bad thing. And anyway, so learning to disagree better is really, I think, a theme that's coming out of these meetings, where people need to be able to have these people adapters. If you play back and learned what I've said about meditation in the past, you might not be so offended. Now, if you play back what I think of supernatural effects, I kind of scientific method in that argument. I don't see any reason why to believe that that's actually happening. So when people make this up to make them feel better, that's great. More power to them. Soothing. And that leads me back to my comment about Stacy that I had originally. The first comment I wanted to make was, she was saying about prayer, how could we study that? And Sam came back and said there's been many studies of different kinds in this area. And I'm thinking that the angle I would study would be, does the human connection and concern and empathy actually have the weight of the matter? And prayer just happens to be another Jazz way of performing it. Meditation, prayer, whatever. So if we're into politics, that's coexisting with all these different things. It's interesting. I saw a TED Talk where a guy was talking about Charles Darwin and his wife and the struggle he went through to not offend her and her Unitarian religion. And because the fact that, we've evolved was a kind of a mutually exclusive idea at the time. And I think it is. But at the end of the talk, he says, I haven't told you what I believe, and it doesn't matter. That was the secret that he was trying to tell during the talk. So as long as we're not imposing and bullying each other, saying you must do this and we should do that, and never change the value of this term has to mean this forever. Everybody listen to me and breathe right now. These are things we have to work out and come to agreement on, as well as the memory of what people have said in the past, so that you don't necessarily think that just because I don't believe in the supernatural effects of the world, and I like to have things in a scientific way, I still think I'm reaching quite far to be involved with this group, because it's more about politics and coexistence. It's not really about the scientific method. It's like one bubble of the group. And those are the bubbles that Glenn was drawing that I thought were so interesting. And if we could know which space or which quadrant of the space that we're in, are we in the spiritual space? Are we in the scientific method space right now? Or I guess today we're in the space, how to become self-aware and more conscious of what we're trying to bring, and what are the methods to become more that's a day-to-day affair for me. So it's like, you bring that to the table, how can we do that? It's like, aren't we already doing that? So how do we do it more effectively without the biasms is, I think, a big thing. And maybe those biasms are necessary because they are competing ideas in certain areas where people are. So how do we disagree better? How do we actually explore a little bit farther without being triggered and say, what do you mean by blah, blah, blah? I would have said, well, blah, blah, blah isn't the point. I'm just trying to be brief and move on to the point that I think we're into politics here. So that was the whole point about blah, blah, blah. And when I said blah, 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 when you take that bucket, it had all of the quadrants in there, not just the spiritual one. It had the scientific one as well. You can play it back and hear it. But you only hear what you want to hear. And I can understand Jazz's point of view of feeling on his heels, because it looked I wasn't really participating in his experiment. And that's another topic, whether I can see where he would get off on that. So that's fine. But it's a brief interruption would have been all that's necessary. I think there's a lot of baggage there. I'm kind of disappointed. Thanks, Sam.
So, Colin, thanks for your statement. Are you complete with your statement?
Well, for the most part, my statement
Okay,
was more about what I thought meditation was, which I didn't really get to speak too much, and trying to align that to what quadrant of the group are we speaking in, which is still not quite determined, but because we don't really have the map.
Okay.
Glenn and I are still looking at that.
All right. So, being that it's past the 2 hour point, I don't want to cut this off, but I do want to sort of really, really express thanks that there was disagreement. There was some difference in interpretation. There was not an actual disengagement. We all stayed with it. We all stayed into some curiosity. And I think we are somewhat deeper in our understanding of each of our positions. So, to the extent that that happened, I really want to appreciate, because that's my part of my vision for what we do here is learn how we disagree, learn what triggers us, move on from that towards even deeper mutual understanding, and then see if we can actually then settle that, at least for a while, if not forever, because we've uncovered that next layer. Okay, so to the extent that that happened, I really appreciate it. I know that there could appear to be some chaos, there could appear to be some discord, but I think this is what we could not do on day one, and we can barely do on day 2.5 years. And to some extent, that's progress. Okay, so I want to express my thanks that happened. We are on the record, as you know. So I would like to invite any round of recap or checkout, and then this is welcome to continue. I do myself have to go pick up one of Ronnie's friends because they're going to spend the day together, and so I'm going to go do that shortly. But I do encourage this session to continue if some of you choose to do so. Okay? My thanks.
I'd like to say something and use it as my checkout. One is I just want to highlight that the way one phrases a question in and of itself has a bias. So there's a difference between saying, is the effects of this because of this or that, or how much does this affect that? So like in terms of prayer, to say, is it this or that, instead of saying how much of the positive results of prayer are due to one or the other, because it may be both. So that's what I want to say about questions in general. The other thing is I wanted to say, even though I've done those breathing exercises before, it was really very helpful, because the thing is, I don't usually turn to them, even though I know they work. And I don't draw. So I have a lot of things in my mind's eye. And usually or lately, I've been visualizing emotions as energy taking up space and where they get squashed and snagged. And what I liked about the breathing exercise is it made sense to me how the core, where one's emotional energy might be traveling, is actually getting pulled out and expanded so that those emotions could flow. So this was very, I enjoyed this session, even though I hate hearing discord. It's always a positive when we can work through it. And that is part of governance. And everything here that happened today is part of governance. And with that, I'm complete. Thank you.
I'll check out with the same feeling that when the mind is calm and clear and not focusing on future or past, the space becomes larger. Like Stacey was saying, the emotions can fly better without spilling over the edges. Leave it at that. Thank you. Good session.
I have a question which has been brought up by what Stacey and Alex have said. What is the relationship between how we breathe or don't breathe and the effect that has on whatever emotion that we are experiencing or trying to control? Complete.
You want me to answer that?
Anyone?
The way I see it is that when we're focusing on the breathing, we're not focusing, the other things drift out of our consciousness because we're focusing on one specific thing. We're trying not to let those things rise up into our consciousness. And that's what creates a space. Over.
Yeah,
Anyone else?
when I focus on the breathing, there's an attention about the movement. The movement of energy inwards and outwards. And like Alex says, there's other things that sort of disappear. What struck me from this session? Many things, but one small comment, which might be somehow feels typical for today, was when Sam said, try to answer this question, what is the mind? By saying that the mind is where we hold ideas. And as I heard that, then the first idea that came to me is, what is an idea? And I reflected a lot on that, and I see an idea as a certain pattern of movement. So specifically it's a pattern of movement, let's say within the brain cells that have a kind of similarity with similar pattern of movements in other brains, as well as patterns of movement in phenomena. And this related to language as well. But that it's always, in some sense, a pattern of movement that happens in the mind. And that made me wonder, okay, so if a mind is that which holds this, is then the mind simply space? It's almost as if space itself is essentially a mind, or the mind. So if it turns out that space is also infinite, inwards and outwards, then might be that there's also an infinite mind. So I'll leave it there, but so the part of the co-visioning work, which today seems to be happening, is sense-making work. So I felt the interruption did stray off a little bit into somewhat trivial stuff, but then we kind of got back to it. And the sense-making activity, which has been happening here today, that is definitely a part of the bond, seems to me. Whatever that is, might evolve into a super intelligence, indeed. Like Alex says, this is the purpose, that's the potential that exists from sense making. So sense making, it's happened today, is a part of the barn, but there's another part which hasn't been mentioned much today, and that is, what world would we really like to live in? What would be a beautiful world? What would be a beautiful way of coexistence. And maybe we need to do a lot of sense making about what is true, and we'll naturally get to there. Or maybe we have to be more imaginative and have a whole session where we ask, what world would you like to live in? Come on, bring it on, and then see what comes out. So I hope and expect that will be another very crucial part of co-visioning process. And it's sense making, like we've been doing today, just asking some of these basic questions, figuring out what do we mean by some of these words, trying to clarify terms, words, ideas. And so we get to know one another, we get to know ourselves. So that's a sort of a living thing. And then what world is possible? What is sort of the thing all of this points towards? Is kind of the big mountain in the distance. So with that, I'm finished for today.
Okay, I'll go. Just a quick clarifying question though. Was Jazz in any way scheduled or on the agenda to present something? Because I would have missed that. Okay, perfect. Because that's exactly what my point is, and it's not a criticism any more than trying to lean in. And when I do lean in, sometimes I take a context or a road which may or not fit other people's ideas. I'm more than welcome to be challenged on what I'm thinking, because I'm not trying to stop anybody from doing anything which I consider good. And if I consider it bad, then I'll challenge you back. It's as simple as that. And how do we do that without, and I've many times, specifically with Jazzwinder, have let him speak his mind on all kinds of things. And I don't bother to have my minor triggers to interrupt him, because I see it's more important to try to furrow my own ground. So instead of trying to, tell him his isn't going to grow. But as soon as it gets to the level of authority, which I think Sam is trying to say, that he doesn't hold an authority here. And if anything, he's just here asking questions. That's how I feel I am. And what I'm trying to do is right now work with Glenn to visualize if we were in a hotel or a building and there's a bunch of rooms, what's going on in those rooms? Because not everybody's in all rooms at the same time. That's not segregation. That's just a fact of life. You don't want to be in all rooms. If you want to be in all rooms, you're a very interesting fellow or lady. So the question is, you come in and ask Glenn, these are the things I'm interested in superstructure. And he says, well, you'd probably be more interested in the philosophy room, or you'd be more interested in the prayer experiment room, or, these things can grow and people can comment on them if it's a positive thing. But here we have no context, and we're just kind of, going about it with running through the trails of the forest. And, it's a great coffee. Well, I feel like we have, because it's coming. Sam has things, and we're on the way. I've had things. People have things, but how do we bring these things without stampling all over context, all over words, syntax, semantics? So I think having a co-visioning where we kind of have our places and ways that people adapters. Jazz, if he comes to me and says, I prayed last night and won the lotto, I'm going to say, well, was it really prayer that did that, or were you just lucky? I don't know if he's religious or not. It doesn't really matter. But if he tells me, you should do this because otherwise, you're going to have these consequences, then I'll say, well, I don't think so. And then if he gets more authority and starts teaching that to people, then you're in a much different conversation. So are we teaching people on the internet? I don't know. But I do think that we should be kind enough to each other to lean in and allow space for the other person to to speak and do what they have to do. And clarification, steel manning is a great idea. Straw manning and assuming and working off of just emotion and cognitive bias is not going to lead anywhere. So my whole thing is what it's always been within this wayfinding. What are the contexts we're in? How can we go around this multifaceted group and make sure that the different areas are all touched, and we're within the context of when we're touching them, so that somebody may have a blind spot and say, well, this is all there is. It's the other person completely out in the dark. So we have to be open enough to know that there's different facets and hear people out. And that's hard to do unless we have a little bit of, I would say, co-visioning, visualization tools, and agreement on certain language. What it means here. And if we change what it means, then we can change it. I'm just saying we spend an awful lot of time in the philosophy room, an awful lot. And I like philosophy, so, I'm complaining about it.
Yeah, I'd like to continue where Glenn left off. I do appreciate what was just said by Colin. I think it does tend to repeat items, and it really does behove to repeat one more time that you can't really remove any items from the table, no matter how distasteful they may be, even an argument. And I'm not particularly fond of the word discord. We didn't have a discord today. We had a disagreement. So coming back to what Glenn was saying, and what I was saying, and what today's whole session has been about really, and how do we become better equipped to do what it is we are setting our minds to do? And we started off by analyzing how we learn and the importance of copying, and not only just of copying, but copying in a particular way that has differed or has evolved for some particular reason. And that reason seems to be to build supergroups of where people come together and they can do enormous amounts of the same thing to build a superstructure and be quite happy about it. And that's a tremendous achievement. It may well be that in evolutionary terms, we have reached the end of that particular learning session. I would cite something like the Stone Age, where we appear to have spent something like 3 million years or more learning how to make and use stone tools, starting with something as basic as having an anvil and putting a nut on it and hitting the nut with another stone to crack it open to eat something out of that shell. And if we are not au fait with these methods of how we operate inside and outside, if we don't learn, even if we don't know what a mind is, if we don't learn how our mind operates and has evolved to operate, how are we going to pass on that information to anybody else? I would cite in this case something like driving a car. I don't have to know how the car works. I only have to know how the controls work to drive it safely and carefully, so I don't hit anybody else. But at the same time, we do have to have a section of our society who does know how a car works inside out, and we have to have a set of engineers who can make the tools to make the bits and pieces, and then we have to have people who can put it together. So all that is society. And We are, I saw your hand up, Stacey, I won't be long. We are, for all intents and purposes, at a crossroads in many, many ways. It wasn't envisaged by anybody that they would all come together at the same time. We have a population that cannot be sustained with this level of consumption. We don't even know if it can be, if that particular number that we're at now can be sustained. We have a planet that, for various reasons, not excluding natural versus man-made, and it appears that the amount of CO2 we are producing is having a direct effect on the level of heat we retain, and this is causing the oceans to rise by melting all the ice. That is not to say that this is not a regular occurrence anyway. And to answer Colin's questions, how many times have we prayed in the past that we know why these things happen? And our prayer may well be being answered. There it is, it's happening now. Now you go figure out why it's happening and record it. So whether the record is etheric or on a hard drive is irrelevant as long as we know and we learn, and that the next time around, should there be one, should we survive, will we have the machinery ready and waiting so that we don't go through this distress. And moreover, it's the distress that produces evolution. The biggest, the fastest learning systems produced have been in distress or just shortly thereafter when they've been highlighted. Like, we don't have universal education. There are lots of people turned up for training and they couldn't even read and write. They couldn't even sign their name. Oh, we better have a national education system paid for by the state. So there are systems that, so there are systems that came about out of distress. You've heard the song, what is war good for? Absolutely nothing. Well, that's a very old record. It set me off on that particular question for a long time, looking for something that came out of war, which was good. And education is one of them. 1944 in the United Kingdom. Act of Parliament, everybody must have 9 years of education. Boys and girls made a big change. And by the year 2015, 2014, that had been 70 odd years, 70 years of education. And I was asking the question, where are the benefits of this education? We're all reading and writing, and yet the conversation levels are not showing any intelligence. Same conversation. Hello, how are you? I'm very well. How are you? The weather's turned out nice again. Yes, it has. Are you going anywhere special today? No, I'm just out shopping. What are you doing?
So,
there was no in-depth conversation. All of a sudden, come 2008, we have a bank system that collapses because it's too flaming greedy. The last 10 years has produced more education, albeit via the internet and social media, than in the last 70 years. We now know how the banking systems work. We now know how the weather systems work. We now know what the jet stream is. Things we didn't know, we didn't talk about.
But do we know how to...
We are moving forward at an exponential rate. And we're not even looking at that.
Do we know how... Do we know how to educate a full person? Do we know how to educate a whole human being? Do we know how to educate someone to be a good person? This was the question Plato, for example, was struggling with. In the old Socratic dialogues, they talked about virtue. He said, you can learn this, you can learn that, you can have teachers of carpentry, teachers of rhetoric, teachers of this. But can you have a teacher of virtue? And they talked about virtue in a sense which seems similar to what you mean by being or enlightenment or conscious evolution. So then that seems to be what is missing then. Or is it? Is that the missing piece? We haven't yet figured out how to do this.
Before I come back to you, in all fairness, Stacey's been waiting a long time. I know you have something to say there, Glenn, but can we have Stacey, and then I'll come back to you, I promise. All of that's very important too. Hello, Stacey.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back, since this is about governance and how we work through these things, that in improvisation, which is, I mean, that is co-creation. That's what improvisation is. The one basic rule or guideline is yes and. So a little bit earlier, a question was asked as to why are these certain effects of breathing? Why does it happen? And the answer came as if there were one answer. And I just want to suggest that in general, I'm using that as an example, but in general, a question's asked and one definitive answer is presented as explaining the entirety of any phenomena. And I would just say that if we adopted a culture where, yes, this is one reason, does anybody else have any other reasons that apply to them? Because maybe there's something that one person has that another doesn't have, and those are all important. So I just wanted to bring that up, because to me, a lot of the things that we need to navigate around have to do with how we ask and how we answer. And I think I'm complete now.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that too, Stacey, because that brings it around to what I think the conversation to me is about. And you from listening to you speak, you're interested in typical people having ways to find their usefulness, or to fit in, or to realize things they may or may not know.
Now I'm just to clarify, I'm interested in all people having very different ways, but with lots of commonalities. So I'm really interested in all people, even though at different times I focus in on some things. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And but you're kind of like the advocate for making sure that the way you like to ask questions to the people you like to ask questions and include them, and these kinds of things. So, I'm trying to think of an example which would be useful if we had these examples, so that we could pass them around like cards, almost like, this is a Stacey card. I put my name on it too, so it's a Stacey and me card now, right? So there's alignment on that card, and I align with the card that she passed around, although I can't tell you exactly what it meant because it's off in the ether now. I'm trying to, as best we have notes. So I guess the point I'm trying to get to is how do we characterize these unique opportunities, these different contexts, so that they're not overrun by maybe a more popular context or a different thread of conversation that's actually happening, so that one discord doesn't have to interfere with another discord. It can be maintained, and that's what the idea of the maps were. As soon as we're talking about one thing, and then there's a question or a divergence, did you mean this or that? Well, there's something to discuss. And if 5 people enter the room and say, did you mean, A, B, C, or D? Well, C and D are going to get lost in the conversation. So if we had a visualization like Glenn had, well, this is kind of like the context of D, which is spirituality, or the context of C, which is, science. And people will gravitate and even share between rooms. You could even bring in a theme of, which of the SDGs are you working on in your particular problems in that particular room this week. So I think without having some kind of a memory of what we said, what we stand for, what we're actually trying to do, which is what's being brought up again by Alex, I think, and the politicking is more useful when you know what you're trying to achieve. When we're trying to achieve everything, it's a little too big. So Glenn can look at the everything, and Doug can look at the everything, because they're not going to give it up. So how do I work with that? When I want to work in a certain context, I say, well, Glenn, guess what? I'll be over in this room. I'd like to come back and talk to you in some of your rooms later. So, when we're in my space, or for example, Jazz kicked open his door and said, hey, everybody come into my room. I have an experiment. And that's what I saw happen today in the meditation room. So maybe Jazz thinks that he's not in a room, but I'm trying to make that visual, to keep it very simple. So I think what I'm trying to say is, how do we respect what Jazz is doing and other things as well, without him feeling like he's not getting a space to experiment with that particular thing. So
I think I have an answer to that. Yeah, I think there's a model for that, because if the theme is co-visioning, and we see that it's about evolving our minds, so then a certain way of breathing would be one example of something that could change something. So then one person says, let's try this for a few minutes. The rest receives it with generosity, leaning in curious, and then we naturally say, yeah, I want to try that. And the reason we say that is because we want to understand what's possible. So then we're sort of maneuvering through a possibility space. So that's a model for that, isn't it? That it's kind of one person comes with initiative, the others say, okay, let's try that for a few minutes, see what happens.
Yeah, and the memory of where we are, what we've done about it, what the feedback on it was, so that it doesn't disappear. Like, in 2 months, Jazz could do the whole thing again, and there could be a bunch of people in the room who need to be brought. So I'm saying it's not what Jazz is saying is invalid. It's that there's a whole bunch of things that are trying to be said with a whole bunch of different contexts. How do we jump with any sanity between them while we're all putting them in the same basket and then just shaking it? That's why I think the co-visioning helps us straighten that out and say, this is, instead of rooms, you could say somebody's garden. So if Jazz wants to invite you over to the meditation garden and give you the 10 best reasons why this is effective, and then I could have said, what, I'm getting 5 of those already without even trying. I didn't even realize. That's kind of.
Anybody else get a word in edgeways?
I think that was another complaint I had. If you watch back at the tape, there's about 4 times when I was about to speak, and I never really got to speak at all.
Stage is waiting. Glenn interrupted quite nicely, and he's been let off the hook. So why not the other 3 who are waiting?
Is anyone waiting?
We all had our hands
Jazz
up.
is on the seat there.
So I'll jump in. And I'm going to just quickly say, in answer to Colin's question, I think one way to do that is to change the role that I'm playing in that moment. So, for example, when Jaswinder was doing the breathing, somebody who was interested in doing it, and they were doing it, and they were getting whatever they were getting from it. At that point, Colin, maybe you could have been focused on mapping that, since mapping is a way that you'd be able to tie in with what Jaswinder was saying, even if you don't feel that there's something else you can get from it. So I guess the point I'm trying to say is, whoever's doing the speaking is that spoke in the wheel, and it's up to us to figure out where we want to connect to for that short period of time.
We've been doing some mapping, at least in the chat. So
I see it in quality moderation. That's where my frustration was today. It wasn't with Jazz. I wasn't having a disagreement with Jazz. Jazz was having a disagreement with me. This is the way I see it. I was having a disagreement with being able to speak.
But
I mean,
you're the one that got triggered.
It's not good.
But I mean, in any situation. In any situation.
Yeah, we've had.
You said, Jazz, we didn't have a discord. We had a disagreement, and I say we didn't have a disagreement.
Hold on a second, Colin.
Well, you put those words in my mouth.
we've had several comments passed in the last few minutes before you started speaking, and you wanted to do things in a slightly different way. That's fine. But the comments that have been passed before have not been answered. So it seems to me every time you come into the speaking situation, you're going on a completely different tack to what we've been talking about for the whole session.
Yeah, we've already covered this, right?
Well, I think I'm more in the meta, trying to figure out where to place it so that somebody
Yeah,
can
but
come
that's
back
not
to it.
where we're supposed to be today. That's
if
the
I may
point.
carry
Yeah.
on, this is being placed in the whole of the GCC and the whole of how we learn, what we learn, how we carry that forward so that everybody benefits. It's not to say that we don't need people who make graphs or record things. That is part and parcel of how we record the memory. This is about expanding our brain power. This is about expanding our mind. And this is how it's about going forward so that we can take these ideas forward where they have not been discussed before, in the way that they've not been discussed before. Somebody has to break the egg. Whether that's hurting somebody, I don't want to see the egg broken. I quite like it the way it is. So it would be kind of good that once we have started, for whatever reason, going down a particular topic or a particular subject, that maybe we're allowed to continue that one. Otherwise, we will be here.
Which you didn't allow me. You interrupted me and you didn't allow me to. That's the irony here.
Otherwise, we'll be here this time next year, as Alex has already pointed out. We'll have the same conversation again, and we'll only have a slight addition to it, whereas we could, at this stage, at this juncture, put a big addition to it, and you can record it.
And
You
move
can present
on.
it to us next week.
Where? So where do we move then?
Have you heard about?
This is question to Jaswinder and Colin. Where do we move?
CRISPR?
Well, Go ahead, Alex. I was just seeing Glenn as the moderator is all.
Well, it's going to change things when we get this. When they get this CRISPR software working properly, they're designing human DNA with CRISPR, designing people with higher IQs, people with bigger brain capacity, by altering the DNA and changing a few things, interfering with the code. So
We don't know that, Alex. We know we're changing human brain structure, but we don't know what we're producing.
Well, it's going to give us
no idea what test results are producing because we haven't been shown the data that they've produced.
Well, before those results come in, we'll probably get a computer doing it already. Smart, intelligent AI machine learning.
So it's time we became smarter as well then.
But do Colin and Jaswinder have a short answer to that? What would you want to move into? What would be success?
Move into
where should we move? What would be worth moving into? What would be learning, relearning, let's say?
Yeah,
what would be success?
I think knowing where you are. Yeah. It's about knowing where you are.
So Jaswinder says learning about learning, and you say knowing where you are.
Knowing where you are in the process, yeah. If you can see and be aware of what's happening in the now, experience that you have in the past with some objectives for the future, hopefully with a handful of mentors and some luck.
Exactly. Know where you are in the now and plan for the future.
But that was drawn on the quest map.
So then
many
it
months
turns
ago.
out. Here I'm going to take a comment. So it turns out, Colin, once we ask the question, what is it you want to move towards? Suddenly, Jaswinder and Colin answers exactly the same thing. Very interesting.
No,
we
have
gone away from, oh yes, you did, awareness. Awareness
well, I'm
of
saying,
what is
I'm saying
going
at a top.
on.
at a meta context, yes, we do agree. In fact, at the meta level, we're all just, molecules flying through space. So, we agree on that too. So it's when you get down to the concrete, we're going to have disagreements and we're going to have to deal with that. And some of them are going to be personality psychology, behavioral. Some of those are going to be just belief systems. And some of that's going to be knowledge and experience and capabilities. But regardless,
there is an agreement concerning the concrete.
No, regardless, you have to. It's about knowing where you are specifically, concretely.
No. Yeah. Okay. Knowing where you are. So it's about finding a process that allows us to know better where we are. A process that gives us self-awareness. So you're
guidance,
saying it's
navigation.
A process, guidance, learning. So it's a process that makes us learn. It's a process that makes us see reality better.
Yeah, and I've had a simple model of small, medium, large before, where if you have a group like this, where depending on who's the mentor and the mentee, as Joshua was mentioning, Facebook facilitates setting up mentors and mentees for a particular topic. We could have decided governance-wise, if anybody has any methodologies they'd like to share, then definitely sign up a MIDI class, like Jazzwizard was saying he did way back in the day. He went in and there was a table there and he signed up and he went in and he did it. He says that's a concrete thing that he can share. So if he shares that, I may or may not show up. But to do it here and judge me here is, I think, a little bit false.
Wait a minute. Wait. Here I've totally fell off. Why is it irrelevant to share an example of a practice for becoming more aware?
No, it was okay. It was okay.
I'm saying the purpose of the people in this room is to have more awareness, right?
No, it's totally legit. That's legit. Yeah, that's legit. What he did in the context of what we're doing, and I didn't interrupt him. I didn't call him on it. In fact, when I was giving my comment and waited my turn, I was the one that got lambasted. And I'm just saying, like, if we know what space we're in, what the protocols are, like Sam was saying, we might have to have a few more discipline rules. And I think Stacy brought up a great one, a short interruption. Jazz said short interruption too, but he doesn't really do that. He does long interruptions. I might be accused of that as well. Yeah, like, could you please say what you meant by blah, blah, blah? I would have said, well, what I meant is that when you take science and all the different compartments that are on your diagram, Glenn, and blah, 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 any other ones we can add to it, not, what Jazz is doing is wrong, but, all the stuff that we can add to it, all the different containers, you could say, of categories, like the 17 SDGs, those are containers of categories. They may not mean something on their own. You may have to add 2 or 3 together, or maybe they do mean something. Sam challenged us on that. At Sunday, I think I brought it up with Heiner, and Heiner brought up the SDG cube and says, would you guys like me to show you how this works? That's moving forward. I don't know if Sam picked up on that or not, right? So, I see that trail in my mind where we can follow that conversation up. Not just, and so where is that conversation? So that Jazz could say, look over here in quadrant 5, there's Sam and Colin doing something with the conversation. That's interesting. I'd like to take part in that. And I'd actually like to do one myself and show people how to meditate. Why don't we try this for a 6-week program and see what happens, right? Like Jazz could do that. Making the point that we can do that is great here. But expecting certain results here from me and judging me, I think, is out of line. And again, that goes back to the protocol of should that have been a valid trigger or not, which is, again, the meta I'm looking for is how do we communicate better? How do we disagree better? How do we track what we're actually talking about so that the meaningful things can be highlighted and other things can be made note of and say, yeah, these are important, but I don't know what to do with them, but they don't get lost, or, And Stacey was saying, well, why don't you map it out? Because that's what you do.
This was a very long one, Colin. This was long.
What's long?
You just talked for many minutes.
Yeah, I think I expressed what I wanted to say. That again, it's not about trying to say what people should do. It's about how do we stay in a context of what we're doing.
I think we got
in a larger picture. So when I was trying to give that comment, I got it was the conversation is now more about discipline and protocol than it is about the meta I was trying to do. because, you know, I got kicked into the curb. And that wasn't the first time during the call too, which you might go back and notice that, you know, there's several times where Sam says, I'd just like to comment first, or someone said, okay, I said, go ahead. And then the fact that I was going to speak was completely forgotten. I think Stacy was aware of that.
Yeah, well, Jaswinder, what are you thinking about? Looking thoughtful there.
I'm just trying to work out exactly what it is that Colin wants this particular session, the GCC Saturday afternoon session, to do, to operate to his satisfaction, and not the way we did the session today.
Can we ask him, and can he answer that fairly quickly?
Yeah, certainly. I think everything was fine as far as the agenda was set. People can bring in random things, but I'm looking for, to be satisfied, a way to be able to have some memory structure on what it is people are actually doing and what they're standing for. Or we're just having a philosophical coffee shop, which is fine too, but I have less time for that. It's interesting and I enjoy it, and the people here and what they have to say. But if we want to step it up a notch and actually have some progress, and I think that's what Sam's looking to indicate, that, you know, we have to be very mindful about what we're saying, how long we're saying it. You know, like maybe we should have a timer. If you can't say it in 3 minutes, then people can agree to give you another 2 minutes. Maybe you'll start planning what you're going to say ahead of time, and then maybe use the Trello board, and then maybe we'll go somewhere.
So success for you. So success for you is if we learn what the people here are really.
If we know where we are when we're talking, as opposed to just randomly free associating and saying, you know, well, the world's in problem because of this, and the world's in problem because of that, and the ice caps are melting, and, you know, it's all great banter and talk, but I'm saying, you know, we could split it up and have, like, you know, the first half could be like that, and then, okay, well, there are some things on the agenda, and Sam had something to introduce. I think that got totally, I think Jazz was really excited in the topic today and really took a lead role, but that wasn't really planned. And when I was doing my thing,
the topic is to create a vision, and both you and Jaswinder has shared a vision about a process for becoming more aware. So we've created a vision then, right?
I'd say that's fair.
We've actually done what Sam wanted us to do. Can we say that to some extent?
Well, I think generally we do. It's just, are we going to be more aware of the trails we're making and how we would like to follow them through? And, you know, Sam had a specific trail ready to go. He knows he didn't finish his trail. I know that when I wasn't able to speak, that I got cut off, you know, but
we weren't
I'm saying the same
to
thing
today, right?
Yeah. Well, I keep saying the same thing, and Jazz criticized me for that, and that's intentional.
Forget about that, but we did create a trail, right? Today, the chat, that's a trail. But obviously we didn't finish it. But I'm pretty sure Sam didn't intend us to finish the co-visioning document today, right?
Yeah,
but we clearly created a part of it, right?
Yeah, so I think Heiner has a lot of things to teach us yet, and from things.
But you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean with that?
No, I think you're right,
Colin.
I would, and I would like to see a way of visualizing what it is we're actually doing, and my maps are not ideal. It's you guys knowing and helping put the tail on the donkey, or put the tag on, you know, this could be on a whiteboard, as long as we're, you know, a Trello board. It could be anywhere. Are we conscious of what we're doing, where we are, and are we ready?
What would be on the whiteboard from today's session?
The chat transcript.
From today's session, what would be on the whiteboard?
The chat transcript, Jaswinder, obviously.
No,
I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say the transcript itself. I think the idea space would be mapped out, and it would correlate to some of the bubbles that Glenn had. So, you know, we were jumping from topic 1 to topic 2, and oh, guess what? We mentioned the ice caps again, and we mentioned this again. So maybe we should have, you know, I don't know, some kind of a newsletter that speaks about something towards us. Now, I'm not saying the ice caps are the thing or meditation are the thing, but as a group, we can follow these things through.
You keep doing that, but the topic that I sort of picked up and ran with today was just working on processes that increase internal and external awareness. And I didn't even get to finish that, let alone move on to the next part of that particular presentation. There are a number of them. So it would seem to me that every time you're in this space and I'm in this space, whatever I have to say on awareness, how we learn to pass on information, we're not going to get on. And I think my suggestion would be that I drop out and you carry on.
I don't think that's fair at all. In fact, the way I see it is more co-visioning, where on my map, there's a wishing well where people deal with their needs before they go on the journey. So for example, if you had to go on a hike, but you had a broken leg, you'd have to stop there and go to the hospital and get your leg fixed. So Maslow's needs, that's the wishing well. So I could say Jazz has some things that he's been, powerful models that he's been leaving here at the wishing well for people to strengthen themselves in their learning abilities and things. And he's 2 out of 10% done.
So the question
right? So people would know.
Colin, you haven't answered my question. What would be on the whiteboard from today's session? What would you say if asked to put on the whiteboard, say in 30 words or thereabouts, what Jas was doing today and what Colin was doing today, what Jas wanted to do today and didn't get to do, and what Colin wanted to do today and didn't get to do. Just those 4 or 2 items each would be plenty for me, without going into the preamble and what happened, what not happened. Just your succinct pre-say, withdrawing, just cutting it as short as possible. Thank you.
Okay, knowing where you are at, are you ready? How do you visualize that? I have a model to visualize that. I could put what you said on that model. And Glenn knows about this because that's what we're kind of working on together. Stacy's seen it. Joachim's seen it. Christina's seen it.
You're not answering the question.
Sam has seen it. That's what would be on the whiteboard.
What have
that
they
was
seen?
one of the questions, yeah. The other question was, what would you say we have done today if you wanted to write
Let me see if I can find it.
Whiteboard.
You said you couldn't find it, eh, Glenn?
Well, Colin, you answered one of the questions, what you want to do. The other question I think Jaswinder asked was, what would you say that we have done or today, right? Was that it?
What have we done?
Well, yeah. Related to that.
We've explored some topics around awareness and learning, which Sam set up, and then we took Sam's agenda to a few different areas, and then we got a people's opinion upon science versus non-science, which I think is a very interesting topic. Sam made the point that it's quite obvious. In fact, it's so obvious I can't even remember. He said, anyone who would disagree with this, I'd be interested. It's so obvious I can't remember what it is because I don't disagree with him. Do you remember what that was? If you thought that it was strange that we actually copied people, or that there was a learning from others.
Yeah, that's
it's like come
copying. Well, copying. Now I remember it. Copying.
Humans also drink water.
Learning. Yeah, what he was going into, I think, was that
copying
is a part of learning, but then that there's also something more than just copying. That there's a certain point, if we create something new, we have to go beyond just copying something, right? And so I think that was also one of the points that Sam mentioned. That yes, there's copying and there's also something new.
All right, here we go. I'll do it. I'll do it again because I like you guys. Can you see my? Take a couple of these.
Yeah.
Things. Can you see that? Okay. So I don't know if this is the PDF, Glenn, that I was telling you could see. Here's the wishing well right here for the personal growth. So this is like a map of your cognitive trip in some subject. So you could consider going to school, or could. So we can actually go through here, and I'm saying a lot of the stuff Jazz is doing is over here with the personal growth well, spiritual needs, emotional needs, trust, sharing. It's not that I think these things are ridiculous, but if I'm up in the, getting ready, and all of a sudden I am ready. If I'm not ready, I gotta do some learning and some different things, and read some documents, write some documents, explain what meditation is, do meditation, whatever may be the case. And then you come up to level 2 where you align with somebody, right? So if you align with somebody, you start to get into a discussion, and this can become a very scientific endeavor. And if people are down here trying to get a grip on syntax, discussing what people are doing up here, there could be a collision in capabilities and knowledge. So how do you make this clear that I'm the mentee in this and you're the mentor, and we understand that, or we don't understand that? So that's kind of what I've been trying to sell, is building up this meta map so that any kind of a quest could be put into it. So
this is the quest map, right?
Right. So I could see your map being the category map, where you click on one and you might go to a section within the personal growth well and set that up. Or you might, there's many different ways you could use this. It's not telling you how to do it.
I think this
It's almost like visual meditating. Anyway, I'll leave it there.
Yes. This certainly relates to the theme of profiles, which you touched upon last Saturday. That a part of the process is to learn using the room and
where you are, what you're doing.
Where you are, what you're doing.
Creating an awareness. Like I say, it could be on a whiteboard. It's just, are we clear, so that when we leave the room, we leave with a memory of some sort, that when we come back, we're somewhere ahead of where we were before. As
so
opposed
basically
to
the mapping techniques help us too, right?
It's a flow chart. It's basically a flow chart of a meta process of who are you, what are you doing, and do you need any help? And these are the rules of engagement of language. You can be in a dialogue, you can be in a conversation, right? And
so the mapping is really a tool for making us more aware. I mean, you can really say that the mapping is also
aware of your
means
quest
of awakening, or a means for becoming more conscious.
And what Stacy's saying is, somebody might not even realize they're on a quest, and it might be someone to help fill out a few of these spaces that they say, you know what, I really am doing this. I do have the confidence to move forward with this. I kind of do see what my next step is now, and what I've already done, and who I can speak to. I don't know. It's just visualizing. It's nothing special.
Then we will know it will work, right? It makes people themselves understand their own quest better.
There's some self-challenging. There's some self-challenging involved, right? Because you actually have to do something and say, I'm here and I'm doing this, as opposed to just making a comment. And maybe you have to do a lot of studying and research before you're ready to say, I'm doing something. At least we could easily map out what the activities are in a visual way with the different alignments of people. So I bring my quest map, you got your quest map, and do we align? And I think the SDGs is one way to help aligning. And I think knowing personalities and personality differences and cognitive biases is a way to keep from going in the ditch, which is what Sam was saying, something we achieve.
I really have to log off now because it's 3 hours in, but I wanted to say that before I came today, I was wanting to ask especially Jaswinder and Colin a little bit about what you would consider to be success, or what you would consider to be progress in terms of these kind of meetings in particular. And at least what I've picked up from both of you is that you certainly share the interest in that this should make us more self-aware, that this should make us smarter, that it's a learning tool. It's a tool for understanding better where we are and where we want to go. And I think that ties it back, together, and that ties it back to this whole big vision Sam's been describing too, of co-visioning that includes sense making, or learning about what's true. So there's definitely an alignment of vision here with Jess Winder, Colin, Sam, possibly all of us. But I mean, I really wanted to formulate that clearly, because
I think the point is close to what you're saying.
Yeah,
I think there may be alignment, but can we see where it is? I think what we have is commonality. I don't think we have alignment.
In the direction of something that assists learning, but it's not so easy to sort of clearly define it, right? That's always the issue. Because what is that, right? What is a tool for being more conscious?
Oh, wonderful. Cleaned up your mess.
It has to clean up something.
No, I was talking to my roommate, sorry. Yeah, no,
okay.
I really do think that there's potential. I'm just trying to visualize and have personal responsibility of alignment with other people in certain topics, as opposed to just having a coffee shop. And both are nice, but time is limited. So I think it's the experiment I'm involved in, is this experiment in communication and being able to be understood. So very succinctly, it's all about knowing where you are, or getting others to help you figure out where you are and how you can relay that to other people to align, and in getting ready, which I think is succinct enough is what I am. When people are too far up in the abstract, or not talking about an actual thing, opinions are very malleable, and I think that's where we can have a split between religion and science, right? You can read a religious book and sort of infer what it means, whereas a science book actually means something very specific. So I think having a place for science minds and spiritual minds to coexist, I think is very important. And to have the right amount of respect and ways and tools to communicate will get you to a point of disagreement respectfully, or agreement respectfully, and at least you'll know where you stand. Now, maybe I'm being a bit foolhardy to think that the wars of all the years about these ideas, we can make a map. Says, oh no, sit down, I'd like to explain this to you. It's like, no, I don't really want to listen to what you have to say. Are we going to be able to conquer that? I don't know, but at least you can find the serious people who are actually being sincere about having that conversation and moving forward, as opposed to the people that just want a platform and just want to do the coffee shop thing. So I say have a little bit of both, because I don't think you can have deep meaning without the social aspect as well. And so I just feel like
questions to
What do you think, Stacey? You're being very quiet.
Stacey, I would love to hear what you're thinking.
So I'm going to have to get off now too, but I was just thinking that I would love it if everyone that was on this call went back, read only the transcript of what they wrote or what they said, and their assignment was to take their transcript, just what their words were, and to pare it down. And I think in terms of self-awareness and what we're trying to increase, that would be really interesting. And then to come back and talk about what that experience was like. And that's all I was thinking.
Very much so. Where you are, and what you're about and what you would like to proceed with, and how does it fit in with this group so it's not overrun by somebody else. And maybe if it's important, we can make a special place where it can sprout. I think that was the idea of the deep dives.
Well, and
That-
also, how do I go about doing that? The words that I'm using, the time that I'm taking,
Yeah,
what does it look like to the people that are watching me,
yeah,
as opposed to my personal experience as I'm going through it? Jazz?
It does raise the question from what he just said, the group being overrun by someone. Who's overrunning the group? Complete.
Yeah, that was a great question. Came to me, a wave of energy is going through.
Well, I think what Stacy said was pretty bang on. It's what I'm saying too. Can we come back with what it is we're about? And
It
add
would be
that.
really interesting to go through the chat then.
And maybe we need to do it in certain contexts, like say, that's why I suggested using the SDGs as an experiment. And Sam says, well, I'm not even exactly sure what they are and why they're useful. Well, there's a good place to start. Heiner had the cube, right? So, and I used the equality of women is the one that I use. I think is so obvious. And Sam says, well, why do you think that's useful? And I could give what I think is useful, but why do they think is useful? It's probably the same thing, but maybe it's not. And do you add it to another SDG to actually make it, equality of women plus education is even more powerful than just equality to women. Not only give them equality, but give them quality education. And not just women education, but everybody. See how it goes into this superstructure of different SDGs.
I think we kind of indirectly discussed that today in terms of what would be good education. Which I think
but I think today was the spiritual. Today went very spiritual, and that's
well,
fine,
we also talked about education in general. I mean, if you think of spiritual practice as self-awareness, then I mean it kind of all comes together because it's all about awareness.
There's a usefulness for it. The problem I have with spirituality is when it becomes an authority and it starts to tell people what to do.
Yeah, but that's not really spirituality then. I mean, that's more like something else that sometimes
depends who's explaining it. Anyway, that's what the governance is all about, right? And ways to respect each other in the time that we speak and being ready. I think that's what Stacy said. Can we come next time, a little bit more ready with what it is we would like to bring? And I think that was
I would love to see specifically, could everyone share their vision of what world they most want to live in? We have to have at least one whole session where we only look into that. I mean, probably we should have several full meetings where we really go into that and just describe what is that world, what is a normal day, how is it for me, how do meetings like this pursue. We can go through the SDGs too, like what would women's equality, what would clean water and sanitation be, what would ecological sustainability be like in a really nice world. If we took a whole session to really map out that, then that would be a central ingredient in co-visioning.
And I think, and I'm thinking when I say map that out, like Sam has mapped, we all have mapped, what I was trying to impress today was we need to have an overall co-vision where this is the bulletin board where we can make this collage. So, somebody can come up and pin their idea on the collage and it's sitting there pretty and they can say, well, I'm not quite done yet. There's a lot to say about that. And he says, well, you've already spoken 15 minutes. Maybe we could pick this up next time and maybe you could write a blog post, people could follow up on it. Maybe you could have a special session. There's a thousand things you can do besides feeling like you weren't heard or understood. That's the governance.
Yes, we can simply do that. We can simply describe.
But we did. We made a
degree.
Trello board. So that was kind of like the Trello board, right? No. Well, we had a Trello board to try to pull our ideas together so that we would have this collage map of things to do. Why isn't it sticking?
But
The tool is simple.
did we create a vision for each person to describe the world they want to live in? Did we do
Well,
that?
that would be on that would definitely be on your experimental part of the map, and something that you could definitely bring, or the collage. You know, I'm more
Well,
at
I
facilitating
think that has to be at the center of bond racing, actually. Because if we're
Okay, well,
going to do
that's a
co-visioning,
proposal.
well, yeah, well, if we're going to do what Sam proposed, which is to write a co-visioning document, then clearly we have to know what is the visions for the future of the
Well,
people
or
in
you
this
could
room.
say, or you could say, what do you plan on bringing to the world? It's not what the world is to you, but what are you to the world, maybe. So
That too.
that's
What
kind
is
of the way I'm
your
looking at
place
it.
in
So yeah, so maybe if we have this collage map, we can actually see where the alignment is, as opposed to stumbling over syntax and terminology. We can actually get to the point, and yes, and I'm working on this, and by the way, here's some concrete things we can do. And then I know I'll feel successful that we're, you know, and even just successful in being able to come to the conclusion that these are the 5 things that I would do if I had the time to do them. And, you know, anybody knows anything about this, send it to me. I wish I had more time for this kind of thing. And maybe you could, you know, that could start an organization. A bunch of people could do something about it. I don't know. But if we're just talking circles and not have a memory or trails of where we're going and what's important, what we're bringing, and if we're ready.
Yeah, I hope we can next time really get into that. Ask everyone, what is your vision for the world you want to see, and then write that down and put that on a map.
Or how are we going to facilitate Glenn's answers to that question, so it lives on some place that we can have as part of our memory where it's actually valuable. And at the end of that process, we can say, well, that's valuable to Glenn. I yet to see how it's going to be valuable to me in that context. But you know what? Glenn's clever. He's going to figure something out and come back, because we're moving forward and that memory is there. You have that information. That's why I tried to map out the values. Like, what are each person's values? Like, that always comes as the center.
Yes, exactly. So we just have to ask people. It's that simple. Right?
Well, we have to have a place. We have to have a place to remember it. And if we're not going to remember it on Trello, and we're not going to be able to co-vision on one form of a map or another,
that's easy. It's here on Saturdays. We ask the question. We put it in the chat. We put it in Trello. Right? So it's easy.
Well, let's keep that mindset. And I know it's been a long one, but that's what I'm saying. It's not that I disagree with what people are talking about. There's no order to the discussion, and it's not.
Yeah, we just have to ask the question. That's all. We have to ask
and be responsible
question,
and be responsible with the answer.
Which means
and be responsible
what?
to follow through. Well, I
Which
think
means to write it
curation is
down.
a curation is a cold word, but memory, group memory, following through. Like I keep saying the same thing. Why? Because I feel that it's important to know where we are, where we're coming from, what we're going to do, and what that looks like. And can I show you a progress map of how I'm trying to navigate this? And you can say, well, this map looks really strange. Can you explain it to me? And well, this is where I am, and this is what, blah, blah, blah. And then understanding happens, and say, oh, I wouldn't have drawn the map this way. I would have drawn the map a different way. Well, that's fine, as long as you understand the map.
Yeah, that would be a part of that. That would be part of asking you what world you would like to see, right?
Well, what is your quest to make the world a better place, or to do what you're bringing here? Like, what is it you're trying to bring here? I think it started with the question, what is the GCC to you? That was asked to every person. So maybe what kind of a world do you want to see? Maybe what do you want to see the GCC do for you? And what do you want to do for the GCC? Yeah, because we're at the barn raising. I'm assuming a whole bunch of things. I don't even know if are correct. I keep asking Sam, is this correct? Are we here to do this? Or, and that's exactly where I started off on my comment today. And Jazz says, oh, he's totally ignoring what I just did. And I'm not ignoring what he just did.
That would be easy. That would be very easy to maneuver if we just have the profiles where it's already written down.
Well, I was going to mention to Jazz how
after having asked the question and having written it down. So ask the question, write it down, have the profile. And it was simpler. We know all the people in this room. We don't have to worry about the others. But we gotta know.
Well, I think it becomes more. I think it becomes more of an update. Is remember the question we were talking? If I got to ask somebody one question, it would, how goes the journey?
How
Well,
goes
if
the
you actually,
quest? Yeah.
if how goes the quest? Yeah. So, you know, the journey, what you're on, like how goes your quest on this particular topic? If you actually have a little bit of a flow chart written out on what that looks like, it's actually a more meaningful question. You can say, okay, I'm going to go on this flow chart and I'm going to put, you know, Jazz is 2/5 done explaining what he means. There's no way I can possibly understand what he's talking about when he himself says he's not complete in saying it yet. But I know it's important. It's in this category. And okay, great. Not blah, blah, blah. The whole
We
thing is blah, blah,
understand
blah.
more. We understand more when we listen and ask, and I'm sure you understand
Yeah.
more now.
Responsible
When you did 2
with
hours
the
a day.
answer. That's what I mean by being responsible with the answer, knowing where it fits or if it doesn't fit, and if it can move forward. It's quite academic. I'm sorry.
I'll have to be responsible now and say good night. But yes, it's a super rich meeting, guys. So, and a lot of material in the chat that we have that is a part of the creation. So
go ahead and search for that map, Glenn. It's there. Just type quest into the file section. And I don't know why you couldn't find it. And ask me any questions you want. All right.
Definitely.
Very good.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
See ya.